It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions.
Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Tuesday, October 28th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Bit of a gap in the last couple weeks, or week and a half of content largely the last American Vagabond, or excuse me, the Daily Wrap-Up. And it's something that I've been kind of toiling with. I had a deep, 20-minute conversation about this with Steve and Slow News, and Wake Up this morning. And, I don't really want to get into it too in depth today because I feel like I just want to get right into some important, get caught back up on some stuff that we want to talk about. But part of it is something that I know you all experience that we've talked about here and there. And I do have a part that I'll make a point of it to start today, but something that I really find that I'm grappling with it's really the cut to the chase of it, the balance between what I still argue is important to highlight some of the really deceptive factors out there and, just basic reporting of factual coverage of what's happening. And, and there's plenty of other factors to include, but, the balance between those things, because I see one very much affects the other. And the difficult part for me is how much importance it even needs to be given. I see people in my immediate circle, people close to me that I know are good people, that at least in my perspective are misguided or lost or of the mind that they need to do the wrong thing for the right, in this moment for the right reasons, because, a narrative like destroying the Constitution to save the Constitution. That in any other case, had it been any other president, maybe even anybody other than Trump, I know what they would have said before. So it makes me feel like that there are good people out there who are just lost in this. That's why that coverage would be important for me, to reach the people that need it more than anybody, to see just a factual presentation of things, to go, oh, okay, that's what I grapple with. My point is that I've been really struggling with feeling like I'm getting pulled into the things that I feel like are meant to be distractionary. But sometimes my job is to wade into those things, knowing that's the case, to try to break it down for people that, don't have the time or maybe want my perspective on it. And it's just, long story short, it's difficult. And I think it's by design. I think there are parts of this whole thing right now that are meant to pull you away from what's most important. We'll talk about Venezuela today, something we mentioned on the show today. It's not that far-fetched with how obvious it is, the most obvious issue this country's dealing with right now. And I guarantee you all right now have a very particular thing in mind that is taking place in this country that I think is monumental. It's paramount. And it's not too far-fetched to argue that if we're dealing with a foreign power that has completely taken control of this country, this government rather, it wouldn't be too crazy to say, go and commit blatant war crimes in the most obvious degree, when you could do it in a way that wouldn't be that obvious, in order to deflect from what we're all doing right now. This is just a thought that shouldn't even be that crazy to consider. My point, though, is to think about how some of this stuff is meant to pull you away from what should be focused on, how some of it is meant to flood the zone, as I'll make a point about to start. But anyway, just to kind of throw that out there and into, we're all going through this, right? Everybody out there, ourselves included, people doing these shows, we're all grappling with whatever the hell is happening right now. So it becomes a difficult thing to try to, I guess where I come from is the responsibility I feel that I have in order to make sure I do this in a way that is not just getting up and just kind of dumping out what I see, but really measured thought about what it is that I'm relaying to you, what I think we're staring at, how I think it matters. Because if I'm just reflexively going into it all, if I'm not thinking these things through, I feel like in many ways that could add to the problem. At least that's what weighs on me. So think about all that. And one last thing to add on to it was that I might be considering different ways to evolve what we're doing. But this, for me, I don't think is ever going to stop. I'll say right now, it will never stop, but futures can change things. My point is that this daily wrap up, the what I do, the covering this stuff, whether it's never gets no reach, whether nobody cares to see it, I'm going to do it because it's important, I think, for me even to just cover these things. But whether that might be more interviews, whether that might be, other things that I do have coming very shortly that we'll be discussing soon enough that might take more time, more IMA panels, more any number of other things we could be doing. So let me know what you think about that and what you may want more of, and it will help me decide. But let's get into today. Now, we've talked about a lot of Venezuela, obviously Israel, Gaza. One major part today that I want to make sure people see, which we'll be getting into more over the week, is that the West Bank has become it's not outside the reality to call it a genocide. Because if you understand what it really is and what this is aimed at, the Palestinian people, and understand what the West Bank actually is, occupied Palestine. And especially when you could just look and see that the same thing that's been done in Gaza is slowly in the sense of the ongoing 1.5 year genocide, expanding into the West Bank, and has been doing so for a long time before that. And even well back before with Trump's first administration, even before that, the weird it's not inconsistent with international law to literally break the law in the West Bank. And then Biden's administration comes in and goes, well, it's not legal, but we're totally not going to care when they do it. And then Trump comes back in this administration and lays out the reality as if he didn't say in the first place through Pompeo that it wasn't inconsistent, that we won't let it happen, even though it was already happening, even though he knew that because he allowed them to do so. And that was one of the agreements with Marietta Adelson, one of the agreements with Netanyahu in regard to violating the second phase of the last ceasefire. Yet he comes out and goes, we won't allow it. Does it again recently. Jordan said, this line is crossed with the West Bank. No, nope, not a peep. Has been going on the entire time. Now, today, we're going to get into the rapid escalation of that and how they are still acting like we're not going to allow this. That overlaps with the flood the zone nonsense side of it. But we're going to talk about what's happening in Gaza as well and the continuation of that, the reiteration of bombing, which is really not the right way to frame it. Israel has been bombing the entire time through every ceasefire I could point to. This one in particular has been kidnapping Palestinians, has been restricting aid, has been violating everything with the yellow line. Just nonstop violations, hundreds of them if you look to independent media, or rather even just international institutions like the UN or human rights groups that are telling you exactly that. So they've been violating it the entire time. Today, we're seeing the public reiteration, or rather reinitiation of bombing in Gaza, even though it was already happening, under the claim that Hamas violated the ceasefire, which I actually can't even find. In regard to whether it's happening, of course it's possible. Hamas could violate it like anybody else could and has in the past. The point is that right now, I don't think it's actually happening. I think the claim goes back in which they'll argue, look at them pretending to not find the bodies that we buried under rubble, is the craziest argument. And they're literally pretending like Gaza is now extending it out by not finding the bodies, and it's expanding. It's pushing their rationale that they're the ones that broke something, so we're going to go right back to doing what we claimed was only aimed at Hamas, but we're carpet bombing the area. It's frustrating. As well as Venezuela, which we'll talk about, which is its own thing, but very much is a continuation of long sought plans. And Israel is playing a part in this, even if it's just the reality of what is, the part of the globalist agenda that they're all involved in, or even just resources. But what it is illegal. And it's shocking to see how brazen it is right in your face and how long it's been happening. And it's not a partisan conversation, and it has nothing to do with drugs. It's just infuriating for those that have been covering this for a very long time to see the nonsensical arguments that flood this conversation with millions. And we talked about this morning as well in a Wake Up in regard to TLAV Tuesday, in regard to the weirdness that we saw of this rapid growth through this false kind of algorithmically controlled platform to create these million follower, just talking head people that are some of the dumbest people in the room. At the very least, the most willing to just repeat whatever the team says. It's wild, but yet that is it deafens everybody. The conversation when they push out their thing and all their million-person follower accounts screen the same thing, and then they all trickle out through all their followings, and it just waters down everything by design, quite obviously. And so that is a very difficult thing to overcome. But the point is that is major. It's been going on a very long time. And what we're dealing with today is kind of like the rational extension to where we always predicted this would go, right? People are getting more extreme. People are getting more partisan, more irrational, more. And I don't mean the majority, by the way, but just what they're shoving in front of you. So I had some good interviews, some good articles we're going to cover today. But I want to start with the two-party illusion part of all of this. And really the whole flood the zone point I was making, and give you the examples of what I'm talking about, and explain kind of why I'm seeing why this is a difficult moment for what this is and the kind of propaganda around it all and how it's hard to make that balance. First, a shout out to Derek's recent article. Part 3 will be coming out very soon. And the general series, which I made a page for those of you looking at watching the video. For some reason, I can't seem to talk today. Not the podcast, because you can see the menu bar here under TLAV team, under Derek Bros. You'll now find right at the top the technocratic Trump administration. And some of these are pages made for the series, like with Whitney Webb. Some of them are just individual pages on like the tag, but there'll be a new page, a new article under this page coming up, I think in the next couple of days. Derek's working on it now. The technocratic Trump administration, this one entitled Pressuring and Consolidating the Media. Very important read. And I think what this is not left or right. It's about the reality of where this government has always been going. And it's not trying to defend the left media, as so many people try to respond to this. It's about the reality that even corporate media, left or right, is not every single thing they say always lying to you. As I think Caitlin Johnstone in the past had said, when they tell you it's going to rain, might want to grab an umbrella, right? Even then, you don't know. But the point is, not everything everywhere is always wrong or dishonest or a lie. Some of the most important deceptions, if not, I would argue, historically always, the most important lie is buried in 99% truth. That's always, in my opinion, how the real deceptions work. Sometimes there's just clumsy things that get yelled out that are lies, and maybe that's part of flooding the zone to get you distracted by calling out the thing we all know is a lie, which I do myself as well. But the real picture is that this is, beyond partisanship. And I'll make some points as we go through today. But watch out for number 3, because this is, I think, a culmination of an important series. Now, as I made the point just to start, you might have heard this topic, Reagan and tariffs and AI, and, which again, I'm not going to being dishonest, especially from the president perspective or the level of a president or just people in positions of power, that's not insignificant. Like I make the point about Candace Owens really going after the French president's wife or husband or whatever you want to think about it. Like, I'm not going to deny the weirdness around all that, or Michelle Obama for that matter. There's very, very real reasons to ask these questions. Now, maybe you think it's proven. Maybe it is. For me, I don't even see why it's as important as people make it out to be. It's a lie. That I would agree with. My point is that that's relevant to go, look, they're being dishonest with you. But it's more than that for the partisan game. It's somehow like a secret insight into their weird woke left kind of push to secretly make you support gay men. It doesn't even really line up for me when you understand that the woke left or right dynamic is just a policy means to an end. If you think for 1 second that they actually cared whether or not you used woke pronouns and that's what they were really fighting for, you're missing the entire picture. It's just like Trump right now doesn't actually care about 90% of the things he's screaming about. It's about trying to achieve the end. And by the way, why with USAID? They're still spreading circumcision pushes in Africa and HIV. That's all still happening. Even climate change pushes. I've shown this 6 different times from the USA Spending website. The point is not that they care about those agendas, but that just happens to be a workable narrative in the places they need to do those things. And so in this case, the point is that you can clearly see that there's, hold on, what was I saying? I lost the thread on the Reagan part. Anyway, the larger point was simply that they, use misinformation constantly to flood the zone. And I was making a point that connected to something there. I just lost it. But Benny Johnson put it out. They said they cheated on a commercial. Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. Trump saying this. And they said they didn't. And I guess it was AI or something, which again, the point is whether or not it was the case. Well, I guess the larger point I was making to start was just that being dishonest does matter. Oh, that's right. It was the woman. I went off on a tangent. The point, though, is that the lie matters. Whether it's about the woman being a man or whatever else. But it's not, but that they lie is not a profound point, is it? Whether it's about what they said yesterday, what their agenda is, or about who they're with or whatever else. It comes down to being dishonest, which matters. But does it matter in the sense of what we're dealing with today? So if Trump comes out and goes, that thing's red when it's actually blue, it's important to go, well, he's trying to deceive you. But in the context of the genocide in Venezuela and the infiltration of our country and the division of the civil war, the point is that is almost meant to make you go, Trump's lying, and miss the 1,000 other criminal activities that are taking place, whether it's Trump or Biden or anybody else. And so in this case, the point is, I guess, that the Reagan overlap of whether or not the tariff point was meant to make you jump at this. It was meant to make you go, he's lying about Reagan, because people are going to want to defend something that they think he's wrong about. But at the end of the day, was that even the real point? Or is it just to get you to react to that, to miss the bigger picture? Also, to throw in the AI thing, which he keeps doing. In some cases it is, in some cases it's not, but it makes you go, well, they have to tell us. Nothing means everything, everything means nothing unless the power structure tells you. Sort of like the World Economic Forum idea, right? We'll let you know when it's supposed to be. It's not new. I said the game appears to be incessantly to flood the zone. This is something that Bannon talked about in a recent podcast, saying, the not somewhat recent, that the idea was to flood the zone with so much BS that they won't know what to do. They'll be reacting at every story and we'll be getting our agendas done without them noticing, paraphrasing the last part. And he says, I wrote that the game appears to be incessantly to flood the zone of political discourse with deliberately false claims, reports, and agendas in order to obfuscate, distract from the real agenda. In my view, that's the Zionist technocratic globalist shift. That's my opinion. Whatever you think it is, whether or not Trump lied about Reagan or whether or not they lied about this, and it's not just unique to Trump or even this current administration, but it's been incessant. So think about that as we go through. Now, what I'm grappling with is where that line is, right? Is this an important lie that's necessary for me to break it down? Or is it just me wanting to go, he's being dishonest for the 100,000th time? And you see, that's, to me, very little importance to what's really going on unless it ties to something much larger. So flooding the zone, I think, are things like this. Now, what's interesting about it is that even the Greenland thing, which doesn't seem to be happening anymore, but it'll probably happen again in a year from now, is that it started out as a meme, a joke. And everyone's like, you're so stupid for falling for them, trolling you for that. And then it kind of became real for a minute. Like within the policy, the dealing with the countries, even Canada, there was some momentum there. So was that a lie that became real? Was it real and then stopped because nobody wanted it? It's really hard to tell. Or it very well could have just been flooding the zone. So we stopped paying attention to the 1,000 things they did within the first 100 days that had nothing to do with what you thought was actually going to happen. In fact, it was the opposite. Stargate and CRISPR pig meat and whatever else we've talked about. But the idea that he may run again in 2028, which he's for the most part watered back recently, but Bannon and the rest, they keep flooding the idea that this is coming and he's secretly going to do it. You won't even know, even though they're being pointed to. But it causes a lot of this kind of conversation, much more than me just pointing to this, because it's everywhere. And he says, because F you on the hat. Like they're trying to make this be a response to people because they know he'll do it. Now, is it possible? Of course it's possible. Would Trump do this? Of course he would, especially if he thought he could and might actually get away with it. I think that's not unique to Trump over anybody, but it does take up the conversation as opposed to the genocide, as opposed to literally the globalist agenda playing out all over the world while people who used to call that out are pointing anywhere else. Things like this, I just find humorous. Flood the zone, possibly. Maybe just they got caught, and this is the line, right? This is exactly what I was talking about. So Pete Hegseth comes out in his PR fake front kind of administration situation I think they're running with right now. And he literally pretends, I don't think he actually stated that I'm flying this jet, but he very much clearly put it out there for people to think that. And then it just waterfalled through every one of these major accounts. All the big, any account with MAGA something, MAGA Patriot, MAGA speech, all of them were sharing incessantly. They're probably all bots for all we know with 100,000 million follower accounts because they all just parrot and share and retweet. But the point is that he wasn't flying. And that became a weird point. And this person says, Pete Hegseth makes propaganda video for himself that shows him riding as a passenger in a jet. MAGA, it's so cool that he can fly fighter jets. Okay. Now, is that important? Well, it might be to some. It might be to make the point that he literally has to fake what he's doing in order to make people think he matters. Or it could be designed to take you down this path to go, look, he's lying, which we know that they do every day. And we missed whatever they passed and whatever more important story took place that day. See, like things like this, MAGA voice. Oh my God, he just flew a jet. Now, the reality is he didn't, as far as I can tell. Grok will tell you, no, he didn't actually fly. He was a passenger. He doesn't even have the ability to. He doesn't have his license. Okay. But you see how unimportant that really comes down to being in the larger picture? But you can individually decide, but see, the case comes down to whether you think it's important to catch them in every little lie, even if it's petty and small and has no real bearing on the policy, unless it's just that convincing people you should listen to him because he's so cool. Right? It's a difficult, now that's not that hard of a choice for me. That's a smaller point, but you see where that line can become quite fuzzy. Now, in regard to holding people accountable, this is even more of the line, because should I care that they continually keep pushing in front of people that Obama and Comey and James are all going to go to prison and it just keeps not happening? At what point do I stop pointing that out? At what point do I need to go, well, everyone must know it by now, right? That's hard, isn't it? Because I don't think they all do. And there's that line again, is that Am I only screaming at a bunch of people who already know that's not true and will share it anyway? Or the people around my inner circle that I know are kind of falling for that, but are good people? Where's that line? It's difficult. So this person says, Stephen Miller goes nuclear on James Comey. It's truly one of the most heinous things that's ever happened in the history of our country. Can you believe he said that yet again? Comey lying. I mean, yes, it's not a small thing. Comey deserves to be in jail. I've said that every time. But the most heinous thing that's ever happened in our country, he's making fun of you, in my opinion. That's what Stephen Miller does. This guy does not, of everybody in this government, of all of them, this is the person that raises my concern more than anybody. Now, I said more talk, more bluster. I hope he goes to jail, Comey. But at the moment, the case seems designed to fail. Look into it, guys. Take a second to look into what even their side are saying about it. And it says, but Miller will make the rounds, getting you hyped and ready to blame anyone but them when this falls apart just the way they set it up. That's how I view it anyway. Dave Smith makes the right point on the 24th. I know we live in crazy times and there's a lot going on, but remember 4 months ago when the director of national intelligence said that Obama committed treason and she hoped had the proof and was sending it all to the Justice Department? Anything come of that? Seems like a big deal. He's obviously making a point. Okay, the reality is she didn't say we're investigating him for treason. She said he's committed treason. He's a traitor. And said, we have the proof, not evidence, proof. And then nothing happened. Now, you have to understand, that's not some deliberate taking your time, making sure your T's are crossed. If you're telling us he committed treason and you have the proof, that should be, he's in jail already. Not going to I argue it will not happen. Not that he shouldn't be. Obama is a criminal, but that it won't happen because they're all on the same side. That's how I view it, at least when it matters. But you get this. This person, 1.3 million followers, never even heard of him before, says, President Trump on the stolen 2020 election. We now know everything. Okay, well, this was the 26th. Okay, so if Gabbard came out 4 months ago and gave you everything, why is it suddenly only now being reported that we know everything now? Because it's about dripping this forward, in my opinion, to make you think moment by moment, everything's building up, which is what you get from all the people that repeat. MAGA Voice says, oh my God, holy SHIT, Trump just casually posted an iconic photo of himself. Just okay, that's important, right? Look, Trump posted things. Oh my God, everything's the greatest. Jim Ferguson says, Tulsi Gabbard drops a political nuclear bomb. This is from October 28th. This is today. Director of National Intelligence Gabbard just confirmed the deep state never wanted you to know, which was that Obama and Hillary knew everything. Obama knew Hillary Clinton was mentally unfit for office. Obama withheld national security. Okay, great. Just one thing after the other. Put him in jail. It's becoming exhausting to have to keep going, oh my God, and just one day it goes into the next and goes into the next. Next thing you know, it's 2 years later. Oh, don't worry, the Democrats are making it difficult. At what point do you just go, maybe they're lying to you? That's what a lot of honest Republicans are starting to do. But this just keeps coming out. This is on Real America Voice. They jump from show to show and they keep... I hope he goes to jail. If he does, I will celebrate it because he's a criminal, just like anybody should. If right now somebody put Trump in jail for a crime, I would go good because he committed crimes and not go, but it should be them first. It should be criminals that go to jail. The problem is that we play the game that they're the one that started it, like we're in kindergarten, and it doesn't actually have any accountability, which is exactly the way they designed this. Even Mike Flynn. This guy comes out on 26 and says, oh my God, it's finally happening because Trump said again out loud that Obama will face justice. How many times does he say this out loud? Michael Flynn, General Mike Flynn comes out and says he committed treason. He needs to go to jail. It's accountability hour. Well, was that 4 months ago or is that today? Is it this hour? How long can we keep kicking this can down the road? I just said, oh my God, he said the Obama thing for the 15th time. It's happening. Tell me when Obama's in jail where he belongs, just like Trump. Until then, this is getting pathetic. We have Eric Dougherty, one of these parrot accounts. I'm not even making it up. Flashy light, breaking. After literally anything, Trump will sneeze hard, and that's what you get. And the thing happened. And he says, U.S. House Oversight Committee deems all President Biden's orders, executive actions, null and void. Well, realistically, that's not how the legal standing, it's such a funny overlap. So all that would mean is that means the second that Trump leaves, they can just go, same idea. Use their political momentum to say everything Trump ever did is no longer valid. What it means is nothing means anything. You have a dictator, no matter left or right, and they can do what they want. The next person comes in and goes, we're doing whatever we want because they started it. We are being led by the children in the room. It's not even a hype. It's not like an insult. It's the reality of people who are so blinded by their team momentum that they don't, which is not even what they have right now. They're not on the team, but that they are unwilling to acknowledge where this is actually going. But I'm not going to argue that Biden is legitimate. I think all of these people are violating your rights. The point is that they're now going back to the auto pen, the same game. He says the committee demands an immediate investigation. Oh, great. More conversation, more investigation, more congressional hearings. Now, I'm not going to say that's unimportant if this was actually trying to be done. I don't believe it is. History shows that that's the reality with where we are, that it's a bunch of bluster and talk and investigations. Let's reinvest the January 6th committee and let's go back there. And how much you want to bet nobody ends up in jail? Historically, that is the reality. So it's not incorrect to point out that obvious, consistent reality. I hope they go to jail tomorrow. It says, we are calling on the U.S. Department of Justice to conduct a thorough review. Oh, okay. So they're just calling on that, right? Not that it's actually happening. It's just, and this is how these framings go. Everything just changed because she stood in front of you and said something. The D.C. Board of Medicine just must also review the actions taken by Biden's physician to hide his true condition. Great. So you just have this sprawling effort to say literally everything was said about him, including how fast he walked. We are going to prove it all. How much you want to bet none of this actually happens? Bondi confirms the investigation has been opened after this. Yes. And she says, my team has already initiated a review of the Biden administration's reported use of auto pens for pardons. That's it. So all the big talk about everything coming down and every single action he took, maybe wouldn't surprise me. I don't see how that would legally be upheld, but it's the auto pen again. Now, the main point is if you can prove somebody else used it, which seems to not even be on the table for their conversation, then yeah, that would be a big deal. Trump has used the auto pen many times. It's when they use it to just expedite the stamping of the signing. And it's been ruled by the Supreme Court more than once, which I frankly disagree with, to be valid. So when they come out and say, we're going to review this, what they mean is we're going to keep the narrative spinning. Well, we should have already reviewed this. If there was anything there, we would already know. Because if you keep claiming it, you keep screaming how he's doing this and doing that, and yet now you're going to start a review, why wouldn't you already be reviewing that? Why wouldn't you already have him in jail if you argue he was lying about this? It's not going anywhere. It says his leadership, Comer's leadership, and will continue working with the oversight committee to find accountability. Again, if you think I'm downplaying, they should be in jail for a lot of things. Using an auto pen, by the way, which is not even a crime, proving that he did actually let somebody else use it, or rather that he lied about his cognitive abilities, which we know he did, is honestly a big deal if you can prove that they did so and allowed somebody else to operate the government. They yell that because they go, we know he was incompetent, so therefore we know somebody else must have. That's not a valid court argument that will ever end up with somebody in jail. It's an argument meant to get you as partisans outraged and keep the narrative flowing while none of them ever see the inside of a jail cell. The TikTok, of course, comes out and says, bombshell! House Oversight Committee just released a damning 100-page report deeming all Biden's auto pen actions null and void. Again, stating that on paper that you argue what he did was illegal or null and void does not therefore make his actions legally null and void. Secondarily, 100 different things I could point to that Trump is currently using still are some of the things that Biden put into place. So now you're telling me that things that Trump are using are going to become null and void? Or, oh, you mean only the ones that you don't like that Biden did? This just becomes insane. What they're doing with this video is just trying to show you that the signature is the same. Okay. Auto pens aren't illegal. So is the argument that therefore because the auto pen was used that we know without evidence that it was used by somebody else? It's not an argument. If it proves that, I'll support it too. This becomes the problem with the way that they're trying to sidestep all of this. James Wood comes out and says, I would ask those who insult and disrespect Pam Bondi to consider that well-planned and fully reasoned decisions to prosecute are cases that win. I don't disagree. He says the fact that she is being deliberate and careful should be lauded rather than berated. Oh, because you know what she's doing? James? Is she being deliberate and careful, or is she just playing you like the fool you are to extend this out and you are giving her cover? You're telling them, trust the plan, team, trust the plan. Give her support because she's on our team. These are the children in the room, guys. What she's doing is not reasoned and deliberate. It's very obvious that they've already been caught lying to you about damn near everything they're dealing with. This is the guy who would support what she did no matter what, it seems. Look at this. I didn't even see this. Robert Barnes says, sorry, James, but that ain't what she's doing. Blanche is actually in control, is running out the clock. See how that works? See, they even disagree on the way this all worked. The bottom line is James Woods is running cover for the team, the government. Right? So if you want to call something a deep state, then it's going to be the people that are propping up this illegitimate situation, whether left or right. Now, really, it's an unelected power structure, despite the inability to make that clear today. But trust the plan, he says. Give her time. Even though you said he was a traitor, he's committed treason, we have all the proof, we already sent it over. But let's just wait and see what happens, guys, because that's what measured population does, right? We just hope the government does what's right. Who are these people? Now, Elon Musk comes out, points to Ted Cruz yet again, and this is the kind of spinning nonsense they put out there. Now, first of all, whether or not Elon Musk intended to do a Nazi salute, to be objective, who knows? The reality is he did what was objectively a Nazi salute. Not that he meant to, but that's what textbook ones looked like, from the shoulder to his extreme movement, all about it. But I'm objective, and I can say, who knows if that's what he meant? Maybe he was doing it to troll everybody, and it went a little too far. Maybe he just genuinely, stupidly thought that aggressively biting his lip and doing that motion meant to the sky or whatever he said it meant. My point is, I'm not going to say I know. But objectively, making a reasoned look at it, it seems like a Nazi salute with everything going on, more likely just to troll people. But I don't know, because that's honest. The point is that ever since then, anybody with their hand in the air is them going, we know it's a Nazi salute, because they're just being inherently dishonest. But it's a tiny conversation. So, and we'll get into the Mamdani thing more. I have a quick point about the overlap to that. I plan on doing quite a bit more in this because of how alarming this is. I don't support Mamdani. I don't support politicians. I think all of them, in many ways, he has shown to be very problematic when it comes to very particular left versus right political stance. When it comes to Israel, he's saying a lot of things I believe are right. Doesn't mean I support a politician who will continue to allow authoritarian control over your life. But what's funny is they need you to be split down that middle so they can keep you blaming one side or the other, and the system marches forward. But that's the game right now. Oh, look, him and the Muslims are bad. Oh, look, them and either the Jews, depending on who you're talking to, or the Zionists are bad. And the reality is, quite obviously, what they're trying to point to are very much people that are tapped into the same system. That's what's so frustrating about this. For all we know, Mamdani is literally just part of the same game and is being worked into here to make it seem like it's something else. The fact that they act like they know why, because he has ideas we disagree with, but we're pretending we live in a country where that's supposed to be allowed, is insulting to your intelligence. The underlying point is he's a secret jihadist going to overthrow the government. Great, prove that. Give me some evidence that I can actually look at other than, look, he's a Muslim. Look, he supports Muslim things. You guys are children. Ted Cruz goes, are those Nazi salutes? So all you're doing, one, is obviously no one thinks that. He's trying to downplay that Elon Musk's was much more similar, but we ultimately don't know. That's all they're trying to do. Elon Musk goes, it sure looks like it. All that does is spin this out in the conversation, distracting from what is actually important. Like Ron Paul continuing to reiterate that what Trump is doing is failing the country. Empire first, America last was the title from his last post. Farmers edition. All the farmers that are being sold out by the government that was screaming about how Biden was selling out farmers. Funny how that works. But you can watch it. It's a 3-minute clip. But Ron Paul, one of the most principled people in the conversation, pretty much always has been, in my opinion. And he is telling you that what they're doing from the Liberty Report is not for you, America. It's for the empire. And I think we can all see what that represents today. Thomas Massey points out the federal government on October 26th spent $7 trillion, $7.01 trillion, which matters. It's a ton of money, 0.01, in fiscal year 2025. 2025. No, let's not forget that Doge just disappeared, right? No, she's all back on the digital IDs and, what it was really about. Whatever Elon Musk did was pretty clearly about scooping up data for AI. I don't know how we deny that at this point, but it's funny how they didn't even try. They didn't even try to keep Doge going. They just vanished. Now, I'm sure you'll get some lip service about how things are moving in the background. They got caught lying so many times. I think they just decided to put it to bed. But recognize how crazy that is. The cutting government in half and reducing costs. No, we're spending more. Everything costs more. It's worse than ever. But guess what? It's been doing that for years. From left to right to left to right. It's not something new. And it oscillates, but it goes up historically. The federal government spent $7 trillion in 2025. That is a 3.9% increase from $6.7 trillion spent in 2024. So Trump has dramatically increased spending, but I argue that would have happened regardless who was there. We should be spending less, not more. And he's the one that's not America First, according to the America First administration. This is a fact post, simply talking to a farmer. And it says, I was selling soybeans for, which I don't support, I don't want any, but soybeans for $16.80 a bushel. Trump announced those tariffs to China and the price plummeted all the way down to $7 a bushel. Think about that. If you're making $16.80 on a bushel, the return has to be a certain percentage for that, make that even profitable to you. And if your revenue gets cut, in half, instantaneously, then you're losing money for the rest of that process, the rest of what you sell for that. Because, I would argue in most cases, unless you're doing a hell of a good job making profit. But it says the tariffs aren't working. Trump said farmers are going to get some money. I haven't seen a dime. In 10 months, Trump has caused complete chaos in the agricultural sector. Now, it's one farmer's opinion, okay? So it doesn't represent every farmer out there. But in my experience so far, whether farmers or any number of overlaps, people are coming out and going, look, I don't know what you're talking about. My costs are up. Everything I'm buying costs more. Everything from what they're spending, from their rent to everything is going up. And on top of that, that farmers are struggling right now. And on top of that, the $20 billion from the government, $20 more billion from the globalist insiders that Trump works with right now, and dumps $40 billion into Argentina, and it still seems to be collapsing. Forces them into Argentine beef. And the point is that his farmers are struggling already. And what he say? Your prices are high because of me. Lower your price. I forget exactly what he said, but he basically chastised them for making that point. David Icke says one of Trump's roles for the cult is to destroy independent farming so cult billionaires like Gates can buy their land and completely control the food production. Remember that argument that we've all forgot to point out now that Trump's in power, that's still absolutely happening? Great Reset, World Economic Forum, that Trump is very much still a part of today, and we just pretend like it's not there. Rather, the people that are screaming at the top. He says it's happening around the world because they destroy the farm. The destroy the farmers agenda is global. Thomas Massey also points out another financial statistic. In the United States, debt per person is $113,000. In Israel, debt per person is $37,000. Israel publicly funds abortions, whatever you think about that. His point is to clearly aim at the conservative side of the conversation. His point is, either way, why do we send them our money? Now, from a conservative, like a Christian perspective, shouldn't that bother you? There's so many inconsistencies here, especially when it comes to the Christian right supporting Israel. There's they just pretend they're what you think they are. And then so many team sport players pretend that's what's the case. They pretend that's the case, even though you can quite literally prove that most of what they do is inherently counter to what their right seems to support. But the point is about your tax dollars, because that's what that's coming down to. Whether it's the Israel bonds, actually, I'll grab that again for you. A great article. Oh, come on. Of course, it doesn't pop up for me, even though hers does. Thank you. I'll just share her link here. And this is the article she wrote for TLAV, which I hope she's going to get some more coming soon. And it was simply entitled, How American Tax Dollars Prop Up Israel's Zombie Economy. It's exactly what we're talking about right now. And this is what we're showing is only one part of that, which is that whether it's bonds, whether it's, any number of overlaps, funding their genocide. You could go on forever in weird kind of overlap, like even the military overlap in how there's legislation, I believe 2024, where the legislation says that IDF members are basically synonymous with the U.S. military, which absolutely makes sense when you understand what's really going on. The point is that all of this is, you're basically subsidizing what they're doing, your tax dollars. How is that America first in any way, other than trying to pretend that what they do somehow keeps us all safe, which I don't think even Zionists buy at this point. But James Lee points out that if AIPAC can unseat someone as popular as Thomas Massey by flooding the zone, interesting choice of words, with millions of dollars, we might as well call ourselves Israel. The race is about more than just a House seat. It's to decide the soul of America. I don't necessarily disagree. This is AIPAC Tracker. The Israel lobby and their billionaire donors have selected a candidate to primary Thomas Massey, and they're already spending big, almost $2 million just for this guy in regard to what they're giving him in particular. But there's tons more flying out to get this guy worked in. Trump supports him, and guess what he blindly supports? Israel's agenda. Very clear about that. So Vince Langman also points out, right? So we have the effort to unseat one of the only America First politicians, it seems, in this country. Then you've got this weird overlap of now Republicans just showing you the true face and going, support the Democrats if they support Israel, and then happen to be fighting a Republican that does not. How in the world does that make sense to anybody who's not a blind follower? John Fetterman has voted with the Republican Party to open up the government 12 times in the last few weeks. Rand Paul has voted with the Democrats to harm President Trump and keep the government closed 12 times during the same time frame. Let that sink in. Now, he's not saying it explicitly, but you can find the conversation all over the internet with him, with Cuomo, that support him over him, right? The Democrat over the Republican, and one of the most, less than Massey in my opinion, but one of the most Republican or principled actual America First politicians in the government. So the argument is that Fetterman, a Democrat, who the only thing they seem to align on is support of Israel, is more on our side than Massey, who aligns with almost everything MAGA believes in, but doesn't support Israel, or at least in this case, doesn't want to align with Trump on the shutdown vote. That's it. That's all it comes down to. You support us blindly, or we will turn you into the enemy. Guys, wake up. It just can't be more obvious. Oh, I forget. It can. Here's James Lee. Is Cuomo running for mayor of New York City or for Tel Aviv? Guys, look at that. His poster says, stand with Israel, an Israeli flag. I don't even see an American flag on that political poster in the United States. You want to explain that to me? Rally to support the Jewish state of Israel, it says. Now, he's been very adamant about this, that everyone else doesn't support, I believe, Mamdani? They don't support Israel. I do. And he's like, that's his main push right now. This should be uncomfortable for everybody. If that was Cuomo running with a Chinese symbol with no American flag, would that be okay with anybody? It shouldn't be either way. And James Lee also points this out. I mean, this is the weird stuff these don't prove anything. But for those of us that are paying attention and are cataloging all of the evidence that shows very clearly that Israel is aggressively controlling this country at this point, this kind of stuff is just a slap in your face. Emily Austin puts this tweet out, gets 1.3 million views. Let me see how much she has. 121,000 followers. It gets 1.3 million views, sort of the opposite of the suppression we deal with, where we've got 77,000, but we get 1,000 views, which just either one of those don't make any sense. You could argue if there was the possibility of organic reach today, then that might make sense here, but the other way around just literally doesn't. People would accidentally scroll past your post more than 1,000 times. They're knowingly suppressing. They don't even hide it. This case, Emily says, being pro-Israel isn't being pro-America. That's the quote. So that's what a lot of conservatives are saying. You know why? Because it's true. And not just because you could argue they align, but even they don't. The interests of Israel are counter to interests of Americans. But then it goes, meanwhile, people in Israel, and they post this video. Oh, look, it's a bunch of Israelis who just kind of randomly break out in weird coordinated dance with American flags and stuff, and pictures of Trump. And they're like, yay, we love America. Yeah, that's not weird or completely organic. Or what? What is this? What is this supposed to even be? They just wander in and go, look, weird. We caught a party of America. That's what they're doing, guys. This is how dumb they think you are. And James Lee rightly goes, that looks 100% organic. What in the world? This is how desperate this is to go, right now you have a very obvious, logically obvious, but a major push, largely from conservatives that are going, you can't support what they're doing and what they're doing to this country and then pretend that supporting Israel is supporting America. You just can't. Right now, they're counterintuitive, and this is what you get. Look, they're dancing at Trump's face. And so what that really shows you is, to them, supporting America is supporting Donald Trump. Isn't that exactly the quiet part out loud? Yes, supporting this is supposed to be America, not what Trump wants. And look, Trump's face, therefore they support America. No, Trump, right now, in my opinion, supporting Trump is counter to America. Supporting Biden is counter to America, but that might be a step too far for those that we might have been reaching right there. It is the reality, though. The reality that either one of them are part of a presidential authoritarian push that we do not want if we care or believe in the Constitution, or more so, a world without government, which we should be fighting for. There's something beneath this I posted. Oh yeah, this is just funny. This has been going around, right? We deserve better psyops. It's meant to be a joke, obviously, because I don't think we want psyops. But the point is, they're not even trying, it seems, or it's an indication of how, ineffectual they've become. Mel points out, thanks to the American taxpayer, Israel is now paying their reservist soldiers a minimum of over $8,000 a month. 8,000 something when translated from the shekel. It says, meanwhile, the average American soldier makes about 2,300 per month. Of course, if they can get money from the government, seeing as how they're not paying anybody. Think about that. Who do you think that comes from? Well, we already talked about this. Your money is going to fund Israeli reservists. Not a secret. They're literally selling you out to a foreign power, acting like that's what you want. Here's Eric Dougherty. Look at that. How weird. Red light breaking. Almost like literally every single thing he ever posts is red light breaking news, even though it's totally not. And you can prove that. But, objective, whatever. Just, it's worth making fun of how stupid that is. But the point is, everyone's reporting, and he wasn't the first, in an incredible development, Ron DeSantis announces the partnership with Turning Point USA to enable every high school statewide to start a Club American chapter. Great. So a government-initiated media pushback? Like, how do you make sense? So if we're to believe that Turning Point is like the media, independent media, speaking truth to power, and then the government rolls out chapters of that in schools through government institutions and goes, learn that. Does that sound like, that sounds like what the government wants you to hear, because it is. I mean, there's no misunderstanding this, guys. Like, this is, if the government is rolling this out, then the government wants you to hear the information. So that's clearly not pushing back against the power structure or the government at large or unless you just pretend that only the right side of you know where this goes. Overall, everything about this is counter to everything the Republicans claim they're fighting for, whether it's independence from government forced, they're going to try to claim as, we're just starting little groups. Anybody can join. It's up to them. Well, yes. But overall, this is the government getting immediately involved with Turning Point USA. On top of that, with the actual institution of this through schools. This should be a line that should never be crossed, and they're cheering it on because if this was Biden and Biden had chosen a group that he likes and he was rolling out groups for their group, what do you think they would call it? We don't always have to make that point. I mean, it should be self-evident. If you would be angry about Biden doing this with a group that he chose, then you should have a problem with this. The point is, they'll go, no, but Turning Point is good. And my side of the government is the good guy. And those people have been lost for a very long time. There will be no impediments to that. And certainly no discrimination. We're not going to allow that. Okay. So the government is now allowing what you can and can't do inside your school groups. Fantastic. But I said, nothing alarmingly strange about this at all. The flood of Zionist funding that the Turning Point USA recently got after Charlie Kirk's death, right, that which Charlie had turned down just before his death, will no doubt promote an America First agenda, right? So the funding that Charlie was like, no, Zionist funding, no, right now, that they then got is now being used to roll this out. So obviously it'll be America First, guys. I mean, come on. For the podcast, I put Israel crossed out onto the, how do you explain that? Israel First agenda, and I crossed it out, put America. It's obviously not in the interest. I mean, this doesn't even align with what Charlie seems to have wanted, but that's not what they care about, is it? Donald Trump Jr. says the best way to honor our friend Charlie Kirk is to keep loudly and aggressively fighting for the pro-America values that we all care about, not backing down to the radical left. Ian Carroll says, seems like we should start by figuring out who killed him. Notice you tripped all the way over your own tongue when Megyn Kelly asked you about that. Oh, I think I was going to grab that. Here, let me play it real quick. How long is it? It's 3 minutes. I don't care. The point is that clearly this, he's avoiding the obvious. But the real point for me is that does not seem to be what he was doing at the end. Even Megyn Kelly, more than anybody, seems to know that. And all they're doing is making it about Charlie, pro-Israel, pro-America, bad guy lefties, which in a large way was what he was doing. But overall, it seems like an effort to try to use Charlie, which is what we've been seeing. Lastly, here's DC Drano coming out on October 25th. Now remember, Tyler Robinson has not been found guilty. That hasn't even started yet, as far as I can tell. He still has yet to even claim that he hasn't said, I did it. Everyone else around him says that. DC Drano comes out on the 25th and says, before Charlie was killed, he started to speak loudly about the importation of radical Islamic values into America. Well, see, already you could tell why this is dishonest, because he was speaking about that recently before he was killed. So it's a misrepresentation of even that. But he was, yes, talking about that quite a lot. He saw what was coming from Zohran. Oh, now you're going to make it about the guy they're all pointing to. Maybe he did. If we're going to continue Charlie's mission, we have to fight like hell against this one guy, Zohran Mamdani, because he has beliefs that you disagree with? What crimes is he committing? Right? The idea that you're actually arguing you should not let him speak because he has bad ideas is the opposite of what Charlie said he believed in. I can point to examples where he didn't actually follow through with that, like in this kind of example, I would argue. Or the idea that, you're saying he is the one you have to fight. The idea is because he's a Muslim and because you don't agree with his political stance, which I don't either. I think government is bad, whether it's socialist or democratic. The point is that you guys pick one to go, that's the bad one, even though while simultaneously pretending we have freedom of thought in this country, freedom of religion, freedom of ideology. You're all hypocrites. I think the world is beginning to see that. But here's what I changed it to. Before Charlie was killed, he started speaking loudly about the importation of radical Zionist values into America. He saw what was coming. If we're going to continue Charlie's mission, we have to fight like hell against this Zionist agenda. There, fixed it for you. Because here's the crazy part is if you're going to try to argue anything was shifting before he died, no one can pretend it's not obviously realizing the Zionist problem. Now, you can argue it's about Jews alone. You can argue it's about Israel at large. I think it's quite obvious it was about the Zionist overlap because he was still struggling and supporting Israel, but not Netanyahu. I think it becomes very clear what this was, my opinion. But the reality is you can prove this. Here are 3 things that show you alone that in the last couple of weeks, that's what he was actually coming around to. The idea of his awareness of what he argued was the concern of just Muslims in this country in general had been going on quite a long time before that. These people are desperate to get you thinking anything but what is actually happening. That's what I see. Now, look, there is an obvious issue to be discussed. Whether you want to make the very clear point that Israel very much does use Arabs of lots of different kinds to infiltrate countries as if they're working for jihadists when really it's the Mossad, not a secret. They literally have a name for these things. Or arguing that Muslim countries are using their immigration to manipulate this country. Those are all possible real things. My point is the former you can prove, like right now in real time that they've done it in the past. Whether Israel, Muslim countries are doing that, I think to some degree you could probably make a case for that it's happened and very clearly is a problem. But crimes are what I care about. So if you have somebody illegally in the country, then show that, prove that, go through the process. The real issue here is that them trying to create this alarming shift to say Muslims are the real problem and they're trying to make it about Israel to ignore that. You could make that case, but it's objectively clear that the evidence is slanted aggressively to one side. And then even then, the cases you want to point to make the argument of Muslims being a problem are largely built up by the Zionist agenda, like the MMEMRI channel or the RAIR channel or these very, very clearly, clumsily put together Zionist editions of what they want you to think Muslims are all doing. That's a provable reality. Does that mean in some cases they're doing that? Yes, it can. There are examples of these things. But for them to make this the case, it's about trying to derail the obvious of what's happening in the country, to try to argue that what's coming is much worse. Now, let's just even say both are true. What would be the more immediate threat? The reality of what Israel is literally doing in our country now, or what they claim might be coming? Look what's happening in Europe. Even if both were true, the first is obviously the more pressing. But reality is there's much more to this story, which I'm going to do more on in general. I would love for somebody, if there's somebody out there, like, for example, that lives in Dearborn, Michigan, I would love someone to reach out to me. I'm trying to find somebody who can actually go there, speak to people, right? Actually, objectively, to satisfy my own curiosity about what they're literally saying on the ground, not what Matt Walsh says or other people that have shown themselves to be manipulative when it comes to politics, to say it lightly. But I'll include these. Was Israel involved with Charlie Kirk's death? Let's look at the facts. That was on 12th. As well as Kerry Wedler's recent article for TLAV, the Charlie Kirk hysteria is a blueprint for future political chaos. That is objectively clear. That's what they're doing as we speak. Now, overlapping these points, social media, censorship, and a couple more points about Israel to get into the ceasefire lie. Doe's designer on the 27th, that's yesterday, came out and said X will soon show which country is God. X will soon show which country a user is based in. I mean, it's like because the way my mind would write that sentence, it like tries to change it. It's just funny, just on an editor's perspective. But it says the users can choose to display either their country or region. Now, we also saw the point of the dual citizenship. I might make a point about that depending on where it goes. The absurdity of having Massey, rightly so, roll out a legislative push about why that should be identified and either removed or changed in regard to, being an American citizen to be in politics and nothing else. And what did Randy Fine say? He called him a bigot. He called him a racist. He called him disgusting. And then he rolls out his own version of it. So what does it show you? Right? It shows me, and it connects to this point for the same reason, that they're trying to build a version of it that works for their agenda. Randy Fein is a blind, he's one of the worst people I've ever seen in my life. And I mean that legitimately. Next to Laura Loomer and these like bigoted, disgusting, like the kind of person that is cheering on genocide while acting like they're the hero in the room is the worst thing in my mind. So he bombs away when shown dead images of children more than once. Laughing about children losing eyes in the pager attack because they're all terrorists, like literally saying things like this. Now pushing more than anybody that Muslims shouldn't even exist in this country. It's insane. But the point is that if you have a dual citizenship push that they roll out, one of two things is going to happen. Well, one of three, really. I argue that obviously that they'll just create a loophole for very particular overlaps that won't be like Israel's not there, but it'll be something that will allow an opening for certain situations. Like if they, where this goes. There was another one I was thinking of, but the main point for me, guys, let's realize right now, we're not necessarily dealing with Israeli citizens quite literally packing our government. There is an overlap for sure, but it's about politicians who have been blackmailed, bribed, are blindly working because of other reasons for a foreign power that you can literally prove, or just lobbying funding. So you don't necessarily need that reality because as far as I can tell, there's only a few that are not, the overlap of whether they're Jewish and in this government versus an Israeli citizen is an important distinction. Being Jewish does not therefore make you a Zionist, in my opinion, does not therefore make you part of the problem. So the reality is that there's clearly, the problem is that they have influenced our government, which is clear. That's obvious. So whether or not they pass this thing and act like that proves Israel's not involved or whatever is designed to kind of bury the reality. I don't think it'll work, but that's what a lot of this is. So in this case, a lot of people are going, look, your platform is ridiculous. It is completely overrun with Zionist bots. And every day, we're fixing Grok because it gave you the answer that we don't want you to see. So this says we'll soon be adding the country of the user. Well, how easy would it be for them? I'll just read what I said. There will be a way for them to simply present the ones that they already work with as what they want you to see. I mean, Elon Musk in particular has been caught lying about very basic things that are just small, petty things. Like H-1B visas or the South African genocide, like being very embarrassingly caught for trying to deceive you. And then getting very little coverage from the left media that supposedly hates his guts. Funny how that works out. But overall, the point is that they could easily just go, well, that's not the case. He's in India. Or rather, Israel, but is actually in India or vice versa. The point is they could just easily just pretend like they vetted it and didn't because they have an interest in working with the Zionist effort. But then it says, and even if this is an honest effort, and they really do want to just make this the case, right? I'm sure that certain actors have numerous ways around this, right? Exactly the way Israel already presents its companies as American. We got over this many times. Like right now, like this one. The article Whitney wrote, I think it's the last one she wrote for TLAV, by the way. And there will, by the way, on that note, there will be eventually some more TLAV writing work, but Whitney has been very much focused on Limited Hangout more than anything and is dealing with a lot of personal stuff in the background. So the one thing I keep hinting at is something that her and I are going to be doing coming soon, but whether she writes more will eventually come to pass, or it's not my biggest point to put more pressure on her, but there'll be more coming. But the point was, this seems to have been, I think, her last one she wrote, The Prince and the Spy. And this is very important because many different overlaps, and it actually relates to what we're talking about in a second, is the Israel infiltration, and that you can literally point to the fact that they tell you that they create companies through the intelligence apparatus that are meant to serve the government, but present as countries in other countries that they're built in. And on top of that, Eric Prince was used as sort of like this cutout American. So you have an Israeli company run by Israelis, who then has him at the front, and they go, American company. That's how that works. So my point is to show you how easy it is to go, oh, they're an American, or they're working in America, so therefore they are American. Or just like a Vault 7 point, just be using a computer that pretends to be in America. It's not difficult for them to manipulate this situation. So just think about how easy it is. I think these are efforts to try to make you go, oh, look, Ryan's been lying about Zionism by trying to convince you of things like this. Overlapping with censorship, I just thought it's worth pointing out how dishonest this is. I acquired Twitter in order to preserve freedom of speech in America. The First Amendment, Elon Musk recently said yet again. And I said, the only issue is you instantly censored people for Israel and your own personal meltdowns. Anybody arguing otherwise is just lying to you. It was on record. It was public. So not free speech at all. In fact, straight up hypocrisy. No, so nothing new, by the way, for Elon, Jack, or anybody else. Anyone framing this otherwise is dishonest or blinded by partisan politics, possibly both. Think about him still saying this to this point, after he's been caught in very bombastic ways, quite literally censoring people, not even around Israel, about things that he was embarrassed by. But yeah, we say free speech because I said it out loud 65 times. Embarrassing. Well, to that point, I found this really interesting, and it really speaks to the manipulation of all of it. Well, I want to make sure I didn't forget something. 1 second. Yeah, I'm going to put this here in 1 second. I'll come back to that. This one too. Yeah, I don't know how I mix those up. That one you've seen. We'll play in a second. But this is the interesting point. Wait, where we go? That on Twitter, you saw, I think Propaganda and Co. did something recently as well, where they said, I mean, whichever ones it was, deport all blacks, deport all Christians, deport all, everything from race to religion, and then said deport all Jews, and that instantly got flagged. I mean, you can't ignore how ridiculously obvious that is. Now, Glenn says, unbelievable, or not really. Laura Loomer and other Israel loyalists have spent weeks screeching that Muslims shouldn't be allowed to vote, to be in the United States, or hold public office, which is just an incredible argument, guys. I mean, that's just disgusting. What you're arguing there is Muslims inherently are wrong, bad, other. I don't know why that's even an argument that's even considered. I mean, that's what he's kind of saying here. He says, to satirize that, Turning Point USA's Evan A. Kilgore said the same about Jews, right over Loomer's tweet verbatim. But Israel loyalists chopped off the context to make it seem like his statement came out of nowhere. Also, they could do what they most love, scream racism and self-victimize. Remember, Glenn's a Jewish person himself. So what he said is Jews shouldn't be allowed to hold office in America. Who agrees? Literally what Loomer wrote. This seems to be happening. I just did it a second ago with Charlie Kirk, right? Just flipping the reverse on it. But what's funny is she said, Muslims shouldn't be allowed to hold office in America. Who agrees? Nothing. He writes, Jews shouldn't be allowed to hold office in America. Who agrees? And it instantly gets suppressed. This guy grabs just the clip of it and says, this is another Turning Point guy. The president of the Heritage Foundation came out strongly this weekend to defend Trump's point. So making it seem like, look, there's even a problem still. The screenshot deliberately omits context. It's replying to and mimicking Laura Loomer's post, replacing the word Muslims. So this is just, I mean, you have to see how desperate this is. You wouldn't need to selectively alter and dishonestly frame what they say is everywhere if it was everywhere. That they continually get caught for trying to misrepresent things, or have a guy go in with secret camera and try to manipulate a situation to make it seem like they're being, treated with race. What's the word I'm looking for? That's so weird. Treated in a racist manner and getting caught trying to deceive the situation, even with mainstream platforms. So before I get to that, this is what I wanted to show this first. This is what I was saying from before. So here we have the idea of creating front companies, right? Which is what they do. You also have the idea, post the pager. This is the show we did about Israel's infiltration of the tech field in light of the pager attack, which that's why this is over here. Sorry, I just had this a little bit mixed up. And I'll play this again real quick for us to remember this. First, I'll show you this. An Israeli military company called Contrap Precision Technologies Limited has opened its first branch in the UAE under the name Contraps Emirates Limited, fully owned by the parent company and operating from Abu Dhabi's free trade zone. The company specializes in electro-optical systems for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting marking a significant expansion of Israel military tech in the Gulf. But my point, if it's called Contraps Emirates Limited, had this not been highlighted like this, and it went on for years. This was a UAE company. It's in a UAE. It's making UAE products. How long does that become? How long until it, or maybe it already was set up that way to be presented as a UAE company that is literally run by Israel? This is not a secret. This is just a very public overlap that I wanted to use to make the point. Right in this moment, we have the United States, more than anyone I can see, at least from in what I can look at, is The point I make is it's like chicken pox. If you look at a map of where these companies, this country is overrun, as Whitney's called out forever, with startup companies that Israel's government created as a front for their intelligence operation that is controlling things like 911 call centers, electronic infrastructure or dam infrastructure, any number of things that this government has shown they're willing to collapse should it be in their interest. To recognize where that puts us and recognize that they're even willing to admit it.
Hezbollah to buy this?
Well, obviously, they didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel. Shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. The world is our stage.
It's really not hard to understand that. And this is a 60 Minutes post. It came directly from their interview. Israel set the interview up. Israel promoted the interview. So yes, they could be lying about it. But at the very least, that means they want you to think they're doing that, which how would that make possible sense when you can prove that it's actually happening? To me, this is about gloating. It's about floating the idea, flaunting the idea, and basically demonstrating that you can do whatever you want. And then having American media not only go, that's what's happening, then go, they're praising them for what they're doing around the world. Controlling supply chains. Isn't that a crime? Yeah, very much so. But only not when Israel does it, apparently. So here is that interview, or that I'll include that article for you to read. Now, here's Eric Dougherty, and I will make a point about this in a, I have a lot, like a whole window that I've got lined up with a bunch of this stuff. But here he is, again, flashing red light. But look, he mixed it up just in. Interesting. He says 2 major American cities are about to elect Muslim communist as mayor. Okay. So are you arguing there's a crime being committed? Are you saying that there's somebody manipulating that process? Or are you just going, oh my God, they're voting for people we don't like? You know the answer. It's unreal. Minneapolis, New York City. Okay. He says the consequences of being, quote, legally invaded. You see, that is the quiet. That's exactly what I'm trying to highlight for you guys. It's building. We just don't know how to stop it. Is what they were doing to you when the Republicans were the not leading party. Like, this is him trying to argue that right now, because of the laws, they're able to do this secretly. I've been trying to articulate this for a long time now. It's the point they made this morning about Loomer and the rest. If you're not willing to sign with the principle, even if you know that they're using that, then you don't have a principle. The point is that these people, if you argue they're breaking the law, then make your case. If your argument is they have ideas we don't like, even if you can prove those ideas are dangerous, and everyone wants those ideas, or people are choosing in these areas to put those people in positions of power. If your argument is, then you're literally either arguing against the system that you claim we should have, and now even more so supporting what you claim they were doing to Donald Trump. Like, these people have no principle. There's no guideline. It is, our ideas are good, everybody else is bad. And anything they do to challenge our ideas is bad, even if they use the same logic that we use, even if they have the principle that we use, even if they claim free speech. Well, they don't get it because their ideas are bad. It's childish in nature. These cities are dooming themselves, it says. I'm not in any way supporting their policies or any of them individually. I think government shouldn't exist. That's why this is so confounding, people like this to try to challenge what we're saying, because they have to pretend that you're on the other side of the paradigm for them to try to make your argument. When you come at it from like this argument, they either try to argue you're black-pilled or that you're fence-sitting. No, they have no argument, because the reality is, if these people are being elected, and I'll even go further and argue that I don't believe our votes even translate to this process. So it would show me these people are probably being put in position by the larger apparatus to be used against us. I would question that. They're unwilling to do so. They're of the mind that the other side, people like Cuomo, a lifelong Democrat operative that's very much part of the whatever you want to call the real operating structure for behind everything. No, he's the good guy because we don't like this guy who talks bad about Israel. Anyway, the larger point again, legally invaded. So the argument they're making is that right now what they're doing is not breaking the law. That's exactly what he's making the case for right there. But we need to change that because they're using the things that are inherent God-given in order to hurt us somehow, that we can't really prove right now, articulate, other than some mass overtaking of ideological culture. God, it's just, and even to that, I'm not going to disagree that there are points to be made. It's just the only way to have this conversation without flailing in a hyperbolic kind of opinion everywhere is to stand with your principle, is to ask what the real point is. What is the issue here? Are you worried that people are trying to, invade the country and change out? Okay, then what the argument then is that we shouldn't have the system of governance. We should, the society we have, because then people can come in naturally and slowly start changing ideas and get people to be on their side. Or are you arguing that they're manipulating that Muslims are secretly coming in and invading and altering? Oh, if that's the case, then prove that. I back you up. You know that's not what they're doing. See, this is going to be framed as me defending one way or the other. It's just principle, guys. It's objectivity. It comes down to what you can actually prove. And these people seem to be kind of irrational right now about anybody who is brown. And it's funny how that becomes the very point they argue was ridiculous, woke left, telling them they're all racist, which wasn't true. And now they come out and go, Muslims bad. It's just, and I don't mean everybody. I mean the team sport politics of it all. Now, Riley Gaines comes out and says, we're being destroyed from within, and simply just shows Mamdani on stage. So again, if this was any other guy, apparently we wouldn't be destroyed from within, at least in this context, because the problem is that he's Muslim, or that you argue, I'd love to hear Riley Gaines. What are you saying? Are you saying that he is secretly doing something against the law? Or are you simply saying that within the law and people want him to be there, you don't like that, and they're all misguided, and the Democrats are taking over the country? Like, you guys have lost the plot in what you think you're fighting. Because if you think you're fighting the Democrats who are secretly doing bad things to you, then you're missing the half the picture, which is that your government is doing that to you. All of it, all sides are manipulating all of us to achieve the larger agenda that you're all missing by pointing at half the problem. And again, this is why they won't even respond to these arguments, because they don't know what to say back. Now, pager infiltration, the pager attack, one of the most obvious terror attacks I've ever seen in my life. 10 years, they claim they let these pagers circulate, 75% women and children that suffered because of what they did. And then it got praised by the West, who claims to fight terrorism. Now, with Caitlin Johnstone, hold on, where's this first. Now, on the point of the pager attack, I just wanted this to be seen before we get into everything else. DD Geopolitics points this out. Trump admits he was in on the pager attack and overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. Now, my gut is this is just Trump trying to take what he thinks is something to be credited for. You're like, somehow I was the secret mind behind the thing that everybody is now pointing to, even though I argue that's only within the mainstream conversation, and most average people are disgusted by whatever the hell they claim that was, or the idea that the overthrow of Assad. Are you actually of the mind you think that people praise that? Insider politicians do. Insider blind mainstream alternative media people do. But everyone else in the world can see that you just gave the very person you said was a terrorist control of the country. And Israel is murdering and raping and ethnically cleansing. And we're like, yay, freedom. And Trump comes out and goes, insinuates that he was the one really. To me, that's just him not even being aware of what's going on half the time. But it says in the Time magazine interview, Trump admits direct involvement in the Israeli pager attack that killed Hezbollah leaders and paved the way for the overthrow of Assad and hurt 75% women and children. It says here, Trump said, and all those attacks were done in auspices with me directly. See, that has all the hallmarks of Trump just trying to extend what he thinks is his legacy by still supporting Pfizer shots and so on, so that alone shows you that he's either not concerned with what you think or he doesn't know what you think. Who knows what's possible these days? But overall, he's taking credit for this probably because he thinks that will benefit him, not because it actually happened. But even if it did, then good. Then they're more so a war criminal than before. Israel's responsible for largely what we're talking about here. But it says, with Israel doing the attacks, with the pagers and all that stuff, literally said that. He said Israel's been very respectful of this country. What a clown. Oh, you mean the Israel who got caught putting spy devices on the White House back in your first administration? The Israel that you said used to control Congress? The Israel that has continued to carry out terrorist attacks all over the world, who's literally occupying and genociding multiple countries? But yeah, they're super respectful of what we do. That's somebody who's not in control. It says, and they let me know everything. They clearly do not. Even Trump has admitted that before, but he's saying this now because that's what he does. I'm the best and I'm the one, I'm in control. Everyone knows that. No, they don't. Only people that blindly repeat what you're saying. And sometimes I'd say no, and they'd be respectful of that or not. Fantasy land. But Obama treated Israel so badly. God, it's just nonsense all the time. And I said, or at least he seeks to take some credit for it. Either way, supporting terrorism. So nothing new from the U.S. government. They also add, people thought the gold-plated pager was a simple gift. Remember they gave Trump this? Press with both hands. No, it was to commemorate their achievement together. If he's telling the truth, which it's hard to know, this could amount to a violation of the Logan Act, the U.S. law that forbids private citizens from conducting diplomacy or coordinating with foreign governments on military or political matters. The act was created to prevent individuals from undermining U.S. official foreign policy or acting as shadow governments. So, Caitlin says something important. I really do think this is important to think about. Now, in like a, just an objective, nonpartisan way, which is, it's funny to say that because I feel like so many people have, it's impossible for something to get beyond it. But this is such an objective, just kind of basic logic point. She says, you think Hamas killed Israel because they're a bunch of monsters who hate Jews? Of course you do. You're 12. You think Trump is trying to get rid of Maduro because Maduro is an evil dictator who wants to poison Americans with fentanyl? Despite all the facts? She says, hell yeah, homie, you're 12. You think Putin invaded Ukraine because he hates freedom and democracy and wants to conquer the world? Bless your heart, my 12-year-old buddy. You think the U.S. and Israel have been attacking and eliminating rivals in Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Palestine in order to fight terrorism, stop tyranny, and protect the world from nuclear weapons? Yeah, that checks out. You're 12. The ultimate example of everyone is 12 now thinking is in the mainstream worldview promoted by Western pundits and politicians, which holds that the world is full of evil monsters doing evil things simply because they're evil, while being opposed by the virtuous good guys of the U.S.-led world order. It's just laughable. And it says it's like a children's cartoon with the bad guys doing bad things simply because they're bad, and the good guys striving heroically to stop them. It sounds like a stupid PG-13 summer blockbuster starring The Rock. But it's the consensus worldview of serious professional pundits and analysts who share this view on mainstream platforms with serious expressions on their faces, and anyone who calls any part of it into question is dismissed as an extremist or a deranged crackpot because everyone is 12 now. Now, see, I differ on the main take. I get her point's well taken, but I don't believe that represents the majority of people, and the ones that are on these platforms, I don't even think all of them believe it. I think that they know where their marching orders come from. They know what feeds them. They know this is what they need to say to be on the talk show circuit, right? That's what it's manufacturing consent. Either way, this is exactly where we are. The people that are supposed to be at the highest level of the conversation are talking about Iran and never even been to Iran. Like, we've lost ourselves in all of this, but that's where we are today. It's insane to think this makes any sense, but especially coming from a group, either Israel or the United States, who has such a long, provable track record of major crimes and lying about those crimes, that we would just go, oh, they must be doing the right thing for the right reasons. It's quite sad. This, I think, is an important one to start with on the Israel point. Now, this is a video that you've probably seen, 60 Minutes again, with Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And Witkoff either is, it's hard to say because like I've said many times over the years, I think I even have an example of this in a later part of the show. I forget if I added it or not. But Israel, Netanyahu in particular, Netanyahu has more than once, like I was just saying, been in front of Trump and the U.S. media and let these things fly. Trump is in control of this and that, and then gone back to his side and just been like, not true. I control everything. They don't know what they're doing. I can do whatever I want. And then that they don't push back. People like us will talk about it in Western media, and it just becomes so, or acknowledging how easy it is to manipulate the left and the right paradigm, how the government does whatever he wants it to do. More than once. So, and my point is that people like Witkoff, who very much, same with Kushner, by the way, but very much are like people working for Zionism, comes out and says something that it exposes the real plot. And even Kushner seems to kind of be like, so my point is, whether he meant to do it or not, it's hard to say. I can see a world in which that was done in order to be like, Israel's the real one in charge, right? And watch as the U.S. government and Trump and everyone else just don't even talk about this. That would mean something. But also maybe the junior team. It's hard to say. The point, a master plan that Jared's been working on for 2 years. Right. 2 years. Okay, so basically before October 7th. And look, you guys know this already. We've talked about the Gaza plan, the reality of they had the island plan. All these have been floated long before October 7th. That's why anybody honest was like, yeah, that's not new. That's not because of this new thing to help Palestinians. Look, we can prove that now, by the way, as they execute all of them. The reality is this was always the plan. October 7th appears to have been a part of that if you're really honest about the facts.
The plan is the reconstruction, the rebuilding of Gaza. And you're builders. You've been in real estate. As you said, it's extremely complex. Tell us more about the plan and how much it's going to cost. Where's the money going to come from? And who's going to award the contracts? 3 questions.
I think it's going to cost a lot of money.
What's a lot of money?
You know, the estimates are in the $50 billion range. It might be a little bit less. It might be a little bit more. I happen to think that that's not a lot of money in that region. You have governments that are going to jump on in, and
So the Middle East countries are going to provide the money.
Just like with the post-war Iraq, it's going to be a boon for people that want to tear down and take what they can. Right, George Galloway, one of the lone voices, calling out the oil for food program, or oil for what was it? They stole everything they could that wasn't tied down. These people, this is a free for all. The Gaza, what would they call it now? I forget the term they use. Just talking about like some real estate deal and a boon. Not even mentioning the Palestinians. They're just brushing to the side like they don't matter. This is a terrifying time for us to acknowledge the depth of evil that we're actually dealing with. And that's just government, guys. It's not even, I call it evil because it is, but realize this is not some like new version. This is what government does. They argue they are doing this for your benefit. Well, all they want to do is control your life. And they argue that the absolute control of your life is what will probably benefit you. Maybe not though.
You'll see European participation and so forth. I think the beginning of this plan is how to get it going, and that's what me and Jared work on all the time. The money raising, we think, is the easy part. We think that happens relatively quickly, but it's the master plan, and we're working with a group of people who have been working on master plans for the last 2 years.
So there are plans already.
We have plans already. We have a master plan already. And by the way, and Jared's been pushing this, and we're working together on it. And I think if the world saw the progress so far, they'd be pretty impressed.
Even she's like, wait, what? So you have a plan that was there before you knew you would need this situation? Like, you have to understand, guys, if the master plan was being put together before October 7th, or let's just say right afterward, how in the world would you know that the current circumstance of complete, like not a stone on top of a stone in Amalek style would be the reality? Because that was their plan. This needs to be taken. The reality that they had intended from day one or 75 years ago to ethnically cleanse every single Palestinian as fast or, in every way they possibly could. We're watching these people now benefit from that. They're trying to use this to rapidly, let's just say that they get everyone out of the way. They turn into some Gaza paradise that only certain people are allowed to go to. These kind of people will go on forever saying he saved the Middle East, when what he did with literally ethnically cleanse the people they don't want out of the side, exit stage left, let's dump them out over there, overthrow countries that say anything else, left or right. How long this has been going on. A master plan. Even the term itself, disgusting. So, what we saw, and this is an important one to recognize, and I have a point briefly about this in regard to Robert being censored, but on the 25th, so the false ceasefire has been ongoing. They'd already started kind of reinitiating the ongoing war, but this was before like the announcement that was of today. But I wrote actually breaking news because I saw this right as it came through the news wire. Israel army says it conducts strikes targeting Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Okay, so here's what's interesting to me. It's not like the bombing was supposed to stop, even though we know that they were bombing the entire time, but they were. It's easy to prove. It was covered everywhere. I'll play a video for you in a minute from the UN that makes it undeniably clear. The point was that on top of that, they decided to bomb Islamic Jihad. Now, they wouldn't argue that was a violation like they'd done before because it's not Hamas, but it's not about Hamas. It's about Gaza and Palestine and the Palestinians. But on top of all of that, I just want to show you that they're going to keep doing it, which is kind of the main point I'm making. I said, how long have we been saying this? Suddenly Hamas is just one part of the issue and the genocide continues. Now, whether that's what they choose to use this for or not, you realize that all of these super inside talking heads and Fox and CNN and America One News and Next News Network and none of them have even mentioned this as far as I can tell. The other group, which as far as I can tell, has almost double the numbers of Hamas. How do you think that makes sense? How can you argue we're fighting back when they've called PIJ out for a long time, Israel? They always knew that this shoe could drop. They knew that if they had to, they can go, well, now that group is doing things. And now they're bombing them. Now, it didn't get a lot of coverage, but the point is that this was very clearly something that was always going to happen. So once, let's just say they get rid of Hamas. Let's say they make the deal and Hamas lays their weapons down and marches away. They're not gone. These are the kind of things that frustrate me, that we can make these points, years ago. And because we don't get the traction we deserve and people just got suppressed, the kind of points that should trickle through the media, everyone should go, wait a minute, what about that? It doesn't actually happen. You knew this was a valid point when we said it a year ago. The reality that this was always going to be something that happens. Now watch as it happens, and we'll break out on the major channels. Good, talk about it. But just recognize how you knew this a long time ago. And on top of that, that this was something that didn't even seem to happen. That their claim this militant was doing this and doing that. From Robert's perspective, it seemed to be a manufactured case in by and large. Now, Robert shared this tweet of mine, and it got immediately censored. The whole thing got pulled down, and they forced him to delete it. Isn't that interesting? Now, here's what I find so fascinating about that. Why not just delete my tweet? Because we're happily in this suppressed little corner right now where it's getting 4 retweets on something that should be a hell of a lot more, or 3,000 views on something that should get 75,000. My point, though, is that Robert shares it, who's been getting some pretty good reach lately, and it instantly gets shut down. And now he's talking about how his tweets aren't getting any attention. It's just, we are in this broken situation. So all that's to be saying back to censorship is always there. And at Roberts, by the way, on that note, he had his YouTube channel taken down yet again. It never stops. But Palestinian Islamic Jihad is a major part of this that no one wants to get into because I don't think they want that shoe to drop just yet. But in regard to the violated ceasefire, Trey, who's not, despite having some cases where he says things that I agree with, is mainstream. And it shows it with things like this. Hamas violated the ceasefire today by attacking IDF soldiers in Rafah. Nope, he's repeating the old story, unless he's lying about a new one that I can't verify. He says, I'm told by an Israeli military official. Right. More updates to this incident to follow. Zachary says, the IDF said it's most moral army in the world. More updates on this breaking development. I thought you were a journalist, Trey. They're lying is the point, guys. They're like they always have. Look, on top of everything, Israel has violated the ceasefire, if you ever want to even call it that, every single day since they pretended this started. So if they did attack Rafah soldiers in Rafah, then there wouldn't be a violation of anything, seeing as how they've been bombing the entire time. So it's just insulting, or kidnapping Palestinians like we covered, or attacking people in the West Bank like we covered, or restricting food like we covered, or not allowing them back to their homes in any part outside that little controlled area like we covered, despite that being a violation of their agreement, or funding ISIS groups to steal everything and hurt people while they're there and then claiming it never stops. But on top of that, oh, come on, stupid. Hold on. I just can't read the title because I had to shrink the window. Israelis bristle as Trump makes clear who calls the shots. So what's interesting about this, who calls the shots in the Gaza truce? So this is the Washington Post. What I find really fascinating about this, is that, so Trump comes out and like blusters in front of American audiences, that I'm in control and I make all the shots. And then Israel literally ignores what they say, but that never really comes to a head. Because people that support Trump don't want to acknowledge that he just got made look like a fool. Trump will never point to it because he doesn't want you to see it. Happens every time. Like this, for example. So first, Israelis bristle when Trump says that. We're talking about random Israelis online. So here's what Trump said today. So Prime Minister of Israel today, following security consultations, Prime Minister Netanyahu has directed the military to immediately carry out forceful strikes in Gaza Strip. Yeah, because they clearly care about the ceasefire. Now, they've been doing that from day one, guys. Didn't stop. But here's what Trump has to say. And I'll read you what Glenn writes about it.
Netanyahu, the prime minister, has not gone so far as to say the war is over. In your view, is the war between Israel and Hamas over?
War is over. The war is over. You understand that?
Yes, thank you, Trump. Because that forceful effort to scream, isn't it funny? Like this is an effort to just be like, I'm in control. And to me, it stresses the opposite, especially as he's saying that they're killing people in Gaza. He must know that, right? How embarrassing.
Are you confident that the ceasefire is going to hold?
I think so. I think it's going to hold. A lot of reasons why it's going to hold. But
the point for me was that, it's over. Like ISIS is defeated, right? Just keep yelling the thing over and over. Somebody in the chat saying they just hit Al-Shifa again. I can't verify that, but the point is they are bombing in Gaza. That's very clear. So Trump comes out and goes, it's over. We know. And we said, therefore that means that, okay. Very forcefully yelling the thing he wants you to think. And then Israel bombs Gaza. So this is my point, guys. Is that done like that on purpose? Hard to say. But overall, the reality is that Israel is bombing in Gaza today. They made that very clear. Trump is out there acting like the war is over because they both said so. Trump, Glenn writes, like any U.S. president, can say whatever he wants about what Israel will or should do. But Netanyahu knows that it's irrelevant. And Israel will do whatever Netanyahu wants, and the U.S. will do nothing about it. See, this is a person who's paying attention, who can see how long this has been going on and how Trump will bluster and act tough, and then Netanyahu will make him look like a fool, and nothing happens. They do nothing about it because they don't want you to even see it. Kind of embarrassing, isn't it? And it says, despite the fact that the U.S. pays for all of it. Okay. Now, Robert also reported today a massive wave of Israeli airstrikes have happened through Gaza. He's confirming that. Israel has announced its intention to reinvade to areas it withdrew from in Gaza. Great. So now they've effectively created stone pillars that outline that yellow line area, which is 58% of Gaza, they claim. And now they're going to go right back to it and keep pushing. Who didn't see that coming? So what they've effectively done is created a new demarcation line of where that yellow line is. They've seized 60% of Gaza, which they already controlled all of it. Now they've actually got boots in the ground. They forced them out. They're getting shot if they go back. All of this was a violation from day one. They claim this is a response despite having committed over 100 ceasefire violations and blocking aid from reaching civilians, as Robert writes. Exactly. Now, also in the West Bank. So this is what I really want you to recognize is that in the midst of all of this, they're using this to expand out to what was all, if you listen to anybody who's been telling you this from the beginning, who's been watching this long before October 7th, this was always going to happen in the West Bank because that is part of Palestine. To those that might not recognize they're part of the same thing, you're completely outside the reality of this conversation. You've probably been trapped in a post-October 7th narrative, which how in the world that's still the case today is beyond me. This is part of Palestine. So any agreement they make with Palestinian, with Hamas or anybody is about all of it. But let's even say you disagree with that. The reason it was always going to happen is because the West Bank is a part of Palestine that Israel covets. Now, I'm not talking about Gaza style because it's part of Israel proper, they argue, but they don't want the Palestinian. They don't want the West Bank idea. They want all of it out of the way. So here we are. Israel now conducts, as they write, first airstrike in the West Bank in months. Even though they've been doing it before that. That's the point, in months. So it was always happening. And kills 3 people in the West Bank. Literally airstrikes in their own controlled territory. We're talking about inside of Israel, guys. That's what the West Bank is. Not Gaza controlled, or rather, open air prison controlled style, but in parts of the West Bank that are only, or in, controlled Israel that are only for Palestinians. And they're bombing them. I mean, this is effectively as if Trump declared parts of New York terrorists, just started bombing parts of New York. It's insane. A militant group allied with Hamas confirmed the deaths, which were part of an increase in fighting in the Palestinian territory. All that really means is people in there not aligned with Israel. For all we know, that could mean random Palestinians. It could be Palestinian Islamic Jihad, for all we know. Ultimately, all this means is continuing the war against all of Palestine. They said they've killed 3 near Jenin. The attacks included an airstrike on local security officials and was the first in Palestinian territory in months. Right, local security officials inside of an area they control. Like these people are being set up to fail. They're absolutely murdering Palestinian people day by day in this location. And it's not even a secret, guys. AG Plus, Israel forces round up hundreds and hundreds of Palestinians during mass arrests in the occupied West Bank. This took place on September 11th. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, this is exactly what we saw in Gaza. They're just literally duplicating this agenda, and it's going after everybody who is Palestinian. Multiple videos of the same kind of things, marching down these blindfolded grown men in lines down the street because they're Palestine. Daniela from the 8th of this month points out several Palestinians were rounded up last night in a detention campaign by the Israeli army. You know why? Because as they were going through the fake ceasefire operations, they're rounding up more people like they've done every single time before it. And you can just watch for yourself as they just kidnap children and men and women from their beds in the middle of the night in West Bank. Here, Security footage shows the moment Israeli occupation soldiers encountered a group of Palestinian youths in West Bank, with one soldier seen throwing a stun grenade as they simply passed by. No war, no threat, just Israeli terrorists attacking Palestinian youth because they can. Or at the very least, apartheid, right? They're just standing there. They just drive by and just literally toss a grenade at them. Okay? Just because of who they are. That's it. Moving along. And that, you know what that is, guys? That's allowed. Like, that's why we see these ridiculous IDF members dressing up in lingerie and stealing things, because they literally, in fact, they even have a policy for it. I forget what it's called, but arguably it's that if they don't do it there, they're going to come back and do it here. Like, that's insane thinking. And so they allow them to just be completely undisciplined. They are full of hatred and bigotry and being driven by people full of the same. And that's not every single person. Clearly, we can clearly see the Zionist-led government is the problem. In the West Bank, Israel takes Palestinians from their homes every single day. No posts, no headline, no outrage. Every day it happens. Now this is the video I was talking about. A leaked video in 2001 shows Netanyahu talking about how Israel intentionally strikes Palestinians. We must hit the Palestinians hard, take them to a state of panic and fear, and the world will not say anything. How he deceived the U.S. to break the Oslo Accords. Now, this is very public information if you care to look. But more than that, this clip goes on to make the point about how we can manipulate the left and the right of this government, and it's all on record. This account says Netanyahu purposely annexes the West Bank right now as we speak, and further proof that Netanyahu isn't seeking peace at all. This is part of the Greater Israel Project. That he tags Donald Trump. Nobody cares. He's allowing it, guys. Let's not forget. More than one example, but this is just with what Miriam agreed, or what he agreed for Miriam, in order to take the money, Miriam Adelson, to be elected in the first place. Trump is desperate for her cash. Her condition, West Bank annexation. Not a secret. Now, let's get into Robert's very excellent breakdown of what he argues is the master plan. The real master plan that they're pointing to was always the plan inside Trump administration's master plan for the Gaza regime change. And I think this is, it's just so dark how obvious this is. It truly is. Now I want to go through this in general. He says, on October 10th, the latest Gaza ceasefire was officially declared. Now, the reason I hesitate when I wrote that, when I was editing it, to put quotes on that, because it clearly was never really a ceasefire. But the point is that there was an agreement on paper that was a ceasefire. So it is fair to say that there was a ceasefire, like an agreement made. Israel never upheld their part of the bargain. That's it. So yes, they did have their latest ceasefire officially declared, but Israel didn't care about that. Now it says, according to the plan, phase 1 of the ceasefire, which I always point out, this is how they do this in order to make it easier to manipulate. They could just end it with one agreement. They really could. And Hamas has more than once pushed that forward, and Israel has more than once turned it down, as even Times of Israel has covered more than once. Now it says, on phase 1 of the ceasefire was supposed to include a full cessation of hostilities, the mutual exchange of captives on both sides, the pledges for at least 400 humanitarian aid trucks to enter the besieged coastal territory for 5 days, and an unlimited number afterwards, which 400 itself is below the 500 marker from before this started post-October 7th. So even that, which was, they deliberately started there knowing they were never going to allow more, which guaranteed they would never even have a blip over the 500 mark, so guaranteed they would continue to starve. That's the reality of this. The data has been clear from before October 7th. The 500 a day plus fuel was already at a level that people were dangerously food insecure. Anything below that, it's only going to make that worse. It's pretty obvious. Of course, acknowledging the first couple of weeks post-October 7th, they went back down to basically zero. That's why people are in famine level and have been for a long time, according to, the experts on famine, as opposed to the Zionists screaming online because they know better, From day one, Israel not only violated the ceasefire agreement through shooting dead a number of Palestinian civilians, but also unleashed a range of Palestinian collaborator militias to begin targeting Gaza's local security forces. Hamas, as the governing force inside the Gaza Strip, decided to redeploy some 7,000 police and security officers to the streets of the war-ravaged territory, attempting to restore order after its forces were prevented from operating during Israel's relentless bombardments. Although Israel's own forces have directly murdered over 100 Palestinian civilians since the start of the ceasefire, it had decided to switch its strategy on October 10th to using proxy forces to do its bidding instead of its own soldiers. The insidious plot, or its master plan, has been in the works over the past 2 years, as U.S. envoy Stephen Witkoff admitted during a recent interview on 60 Minutes, was also involves carving up Gaza into cantons ruled by separate forces. Now, this I found very interesting. We discussed this with this interview, by the way, with Dave DeCamp, we'll get to in a minute, where he made this point. So what my argument early, which we'll get to in these as well, not early, but before we first started getting into this part of the conversation, was that I get the sense that Netanyahu or whoever the power structures are trying to swap out the excuse of Hamas for something new. Now, whether that's letting them rule for something different, calling them Hamas, or pretending that is Hamas in the sense of them attacking civilians, or however you play this out, the ISIS-linked gangs, I very much got the sense was what they were using to transition away from using Hamas. And remember, they were the ones that were stealing aid. We'll get into it in the article. But his point is that, as Dave also acknowledged, that they were allowing these groups to essentially rule parts of the Gaza in the yellow zone. Weirdly, just like in Yemen, where you have the Al-Qaeda controlled zones within the Saudi Arabia controlled area, or weirdly in Syria, where you have ISIS controlled territories within the US controlled area. Guys, this is not a mirage. It's not a secret. It's obvious. They work with these groups. It shouldn't even be hard to acknowledge today. The point on this overlap is, where was I? So right now, in the new budding version of the same old thing they do everywhere, you now have them taking over this area, or even better, in Syria, they literally handed over control to that group. It's incredible how obvious that is. And so now you have a situation where you're giving ISIS-linked groups control of parts of Gaza, which, how does that not come back to, like, either Israel will later use them as an excuse to further annihilate things in the area, or they'll be used to argue that they are Hamas and they're letting them take control when really they're getting rid of every Palestinian they can, or maybe they just use them to say that's who should rule so they can momentarily act like they're working with Palestinians. I don't know, but none of that is what Palestinians want, which matters. Secondarily, is it what in the interest of any Palestinian, anywhere you look? So it's important to think about that. They're already giving ISIS groups, part of, or linked groups, control of parts of Gaza. It says this plot is a strategy for a multi-layered scheme that will seek to effect regime change, and in its worst iteration means the taxpayer will foot the bill, for another multinational war of aggression. The goal being the completion of the objectives Israel failed to achieve through its own military operations. In order to fully understand the scheme, all of the relevant factors must be explored. Now, under ceasefire violations, as mentioned above, the Israelis had agreed upon letting a set number of humanitarian aid trucks enter Gaza on day one of the supposed ceasefire. Originally, that number, they said, was 400 for the first 5 days, and then it was supposed to go up. And it says they'd even agreed to allow 600 trucks to enter on that first part of the phase, so that'd be 100 over the 500 limit, which is a positive step, but a very small one, if it's especially only for 1 day, which is what happened, which is the amount required to begin ensuring the population can access the bare minimum required under international law. Now, the reason he says that is because the 500 was the status quo that they created, which was creating food insecurity. At the moment, the international argument is like, at a minimum, 600 has to be coming through to work back the situation. And even then, people will die for a period of time before they can even, like we've talked about many times over the years with situations of mass starvation. People, even if given food, may not survive because of how severe it has become. So that's what they demand. And it says, instead, though, after agreeing to that, Israel's allowed an average of 90 aid trucks to enter Gaza each day since it began. So 400 was the agreement for the first days, and it was supposed to increase after that. Then they go, yeah, we'll give you 600 for the first 5 days anyway, and then just didn't do that. So you see how this works? But then Witkoff and Jared and Trump and everybody else comes out and goes, the deal that Israel, but that's not even what's happening. Let alone even actually initiated, since they're bombing, but they don't even agree to the parts they have to verify. Then you get the UN that comes out and goes, there's only 90 trucks. And Israel goes, they're stopping at Hamas. And it never ends. So they're lying to you. They only did 90 instead. And it says, while at least 6,000 trucks remain in limbo waiting at these crossing points for the Israeli approval to transport their desperately needed medical and food aid along with other essential items. This has been going on for over a year and a half. As part of the initial phase of the Gaza ceasefire agreement, the Israelis were supposed to withdraw to what is known as the Yellow Line inside of the territory. And it's the image for those not on the podcast, in an approach that was intended to result in an eventual full withdrawal of their forces from the besieged enclave. The area in which Israel was supposedly set to remain was actually 53% of Gaza, yet on the ground ended up being about 58%, a statistic that hasn't really been independently verified. Now, it could be more than that. My point, which I can't seem to get this is why this is done this way, why you can have like an 8-point plan on Trump's side and a 5-point plan on Netanyahu's side, and they go, well, just agree and we'll work out the detail. No, that they're designed to fail. The reality is that they're not agreeing to the same things. They're not even executing the same things. And so in this case, my point was they were supposed to, and you could read it in the deal, allowed Palestinians to go back to their homes in the north, in the south, anywhere where they had been pushed away from. Now, the Yellow Line was what Israel simply was arguing they put in place to ensure that they could help build back in the controlled area behind them, not that they were going to restrict access to people's homes. And then what they do, they shot anybody coming near them, and they said, they're trying to rush us at the line. And they knew what they were doing. They're creating the narrative that will make it sound like Palestinians are doing the wrong thing when what they did inherently violated the agreement that was a core part of it. So that's what that became. Meanwhile, we're suppressing aid, kidnapping people, still bombing, the whole thing. According to to BBC Verify, which we should never blindly trust any of these places, Israeli forces were in fact confirmed through geolocation tools to be operating hundreds of meters deeper into Gaza territory than even the Yellow Line that they permitted, which was 60%. Right? So they take more than they should. They don't allow them to cross that, and then they still venture into the areas they claim are, not the safe areas and kill people, because that's what they do the entire time. And even BBC, who's historically been on their side, is going, yeah, we confirm that they were in fact crossing that line. Any number of these things are violations of the ceasefire. Israel has, of course, continued murdering Palestinian civilians on a daily basis, sometimes through drone gunfire, oftentimes through bombardment, and in different instances due to direct sniper fire from Israeli soldiers themselves. The worst day of killing, and this is as of he wrote this, by the way, which came out on the 25th. I believe there's been much more than that since then. The worst day of the killing by far occurred last Sunday when Israel carried out 100 airstrikes, killing at least 44 civilians, while Benjamin Netanyahu later bragged about dropping 153 tons of bombs on Gaza. This bombing occurred after 2 Israeli soldiers were killed and 3 Israeli settlers sustained injuries when they ran over an unexploded ordnance. And this is what Robert found out himself. And this was backed up by Brian Grimm, Dropsite News, and a few others. Instead of initially admitting this, the Israeli military concocted a fabricated story about Hamas fighters firing an RPG warhead at their soldiers. Not only did this lead to a breakdown in the ceasefire, which was already being violated, to such a degree that even Israeli media reported the agreement had collapsed. It also represented a major cover-up of yet another ceasefire violation by Israel. It says, despite claiming to have halted all military operations, the Israeli army continues to carry out demolition work against the remaining Palestinian civilian infrastructure in the areas behind its Yellow Line. I mean, think about this, guys. They're claiming they're rebuilding, but in doing so, what they're doing is destroying everything that's left to rebuild. That's not what they want. If you're claiming to do this for Palestinians, which let's not forget, are not even included in the agreement. There's not a place for them in any of this. Or they're all acting like this is a peace deal for Palestine. It's just so gross. It makes me so angry that there are people out there that are it's more so to the ones that know they're misrepresenting it, like the ones we point out. What it says even more controversial is that it continues to employ many Israeli civilian contractors from the private sector who are paid daily rates by the Israeli Defense Ministry of up to $900. An entire blood money demolition industry has developed in Israel that has continued since the ceasefire. One that costs an average of $30 million per month that you are paying for, America. And the reality is they're just destroying the rest of Palestinian homes. Who cares if they've got possessions inside those homes? Who cares if they tried to make it better? Who cares if there's places where people are still in there because they can't flee, because they have no legs, or because they're in a... It's over the top. as over 60,000 Israeli businesses have closed since October 7th. And while the economy is in general has taken enormous hits, basically collapsing at this point in very, very real ways, propped up by the obvious, this new demolition industry provides jobs and fund injections into Israeli businesses. Israel is now demarcating its yellow line with cement blocks and security equipment behind which it carries out its demolition operations. Remember, they're now bombing again today in the areas to which they pushed them into. And it says, if you look, and again, just so you didn't miss that, they've been bombing the whole time. But this is them now publicly saying we're going to begin, which means it's going to be far worse. It says, if you look at Israel's refusal to allow sufficient aid into Gaza, its violation of the Yellow Line withdrawal agreement, along with its continuation of military operations and its inability to actually cease fire, it's clear that it does not take U.S. President Donald Trump's 20-point plan seriously. That's the point, right? They'll never say that. But if you look at the facts, they don't care what Trump says. They do whatever they want, and Trump doesn't call it out. Who has the upper hand in that situation? And it says, to say the least, or as we will later establish, they are using the so-called peace deal as a carefully calibrated plot aimed at achieving a specific set of war goals under the cover of a ceasefire, possibly both. So far, the only ones to have actually ceased fire, and you can easily verify this, are the Palestinian armed factions. See, this is what frustrates people that want to, the reality of everything we've shown you, even now admitted by Donald Trump, was that they were the ISIS-linked gangs that were either shooting Palestinians or that Hamas were firing on and did kill them. Trump admitted that. And then in the Knesset, again, you can have them publicly admitting that who they're arming and working with are actually ISIS-linked gangs. That is in the major Haaretz newspaper. The point is, whose personnel are affiliated with ISIS, the gangs they're working with in Gaza. Trump and Netanyahu said, what's wrong with that? Not a secret. I included as always. It's just crazy how many people ignore the facts in front of them. And it says, where were we? Yeah, so far they've had to actually, the Palestinian armed forces are the ones that have actually stopped firing on Israel. ISIS-linked proxy strategy. Now, since the Israeli invasion of the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza, May 6, 2024, bombing it since October 7th, or had bombed it on that day forward, Israel has adopted a strategy of weaponizing aid-looting gangsters, bringing them under their direct control and repurposing them for direct military and political agendas. We've been trying to call attention to this for a while now. Not only was Israel manufacturing famine at its top human rights group, as its top human rights group, B'Tselem, has accused it of, and I have the image right here, actually. I mean, this is B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights platform, saying, look, this is famine they're committing. Say to it the IPC and literally every famine expert in the world, but let's keep listening to Zionists online. But it says, and using these criminal groups to block the entrance of aid in order to blame it on Hamas. But it also began working on building a military force that it would later employ to work against Hamas and other Palestinian groups resisting Israel. So you see, it's like they're setting this up to create the new dynamic that will keep the status quo that they need continuing, at least as far as they want it to. It says there are now 3 primary groups of militant collaborators organizations. Remember these. They're located in the Gaza Strip. Each wing of this anti-Hamas coalition of these Israeli-backed death squads is responsible for managing a different turf. Operating out of the eastern Rafah is the armed gang calling itself the Popular Forces. They can't even seem to make new names for half these things. It's all like the same kind of English overlap to what they want. Freedom, something, But it says led by convicted drug trafficker. The main one, I would argue, is ISIS affiliate Yasser Abu Shabab. Following the Israeli seizure of the Rafah crossing in May 6, 2024, this force began receiving overt backing from Israel to carry out coordinated armed robberies of humanitarian aid trucks heading into Gaza, making it the main and original collaborator organization following October 7th. And this is the group that we're using to claim that Hamas was stealing all this aid. That's why they kept getting caught, like in regard to what the narratives, videos they would show, or the flower massacre. Like this was coordinated. Says the so-called Popular Forces, a newer name for the group that had previously operated in the shadows and solely focused on stealing humanitarian aid. Under Israeli supervision, inside territory considered an active kill zone for anyone other than the Israelis and coordinated aid truck entities, the militants would demand $4,000 bribes from humanitarian organizations or they would seize the aid. Now, in case you missed the main point, they're doing this in a location that only Israel controls. That's what I was saying. How long did I say that right in the beginning? You're talking about a middle ground that Israel secures, and you're claiming that they can't. It's not like it's rolling into Gaza and getting seized upon. They're the ones grabbing this before it can even reach them and then selling it at higher prices. It was always there, guys. While civilians in Gaza were suffering severe malnutrition and lacked the ability to get their hands on medical supplies, clean water, shelter, food, Abu Shabaab's men were hoarding the aid and living under 24-hour Israeli military protection in eastern Rafah. They stockpiled the stolen aid and then drip-fed it to the black market, where civilians were forced to pay exorbitant prices for the bare necessities. Later in 2024, however, Yasser Abu Shabaab was directed to change his ISIS-linked gang's image, sort of like Jolani, right? A project that Western mainstream media aided him in. Now realize there was an overlap to this. They felt like it was working to some degree, even though I don't think it really was, in Syria. So they said, hey, let's just turn this guy into the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. He can be feeding people instead of raping and torturing them. Suddenly, in the Israeli and corporate media began presenting Abu Shabaab and his gang of criminals as a grassroots anti-Hamas opposition force. Like in Syria, guys, this is what they do. The Western media's facelift. Now, really, before I move forward, that's what Israel does. And then you should understand that's why that's what U.S. did in Israel's wars all around the world. The Western media's facelift to a band of drug dealers, Salafist militants, and murderers had begun. Then, during the Gaza ceasefire that began in January of 2025, Tel Aviv supplied Abu Shabaab's men with Israeli tactical vests, helmets, badges, weapons, and vehicles. After Israel decided to collapse the ceasefire in March, the so-called popular forces were officially born. This is not hard to recognize, guys. I mean, you think Israel's going to be giving them their work? I mean, the point is that now you can prove all of this. That's why this has come before. Robert was reporting this long before we got here. Now that they've pushed them into the spotlight, you can now prove all of this. It says on July 24th, the Wall Street Journal even published an article entitled Gazans Are Finished with Hamas, which they claim was written by Yasser Abu Shabaab. And we pointed this out. However, this promotional piece for the ISIS-linked aid looting death squad could not have been written by Abu Shabaab, not only because he doesn't speak English, but because he's reportedly illiterate in Arabic too. So either they literally like invited him in and wrote and like as a stenographer, like let him read out what they would write and then publish what this ISIS-linked gangster was saying. It's just insane in and of itself. More so, it seems like Israel concocted a propaganda tool like they did with Syria or anywhere else you could make these cases. Or, I always forget the girl's name, that little girl they were using in Syria, or the Oman kid they used in the back of the ambulance that they dressed up with makeup and they literally proved that. It's just so wild how long this could be so clear. And yet, again, it's because the people in the status quo are invested in maintaining it. The so-called popular forces were even collaborating with the American private military contractor-led Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Remember, this is the American Green Beret. Tony, was it Aguilar? This is him talking about this on many different podcasts where he said we were literally told to kill children. Like they claim he was making it all up, but guys, there's just so much you can ignore. Only so much you can ignore. Only so many IDF whistleblowers and so many military personnel. And I mean, every position you could possibly look at, from U.S. to Israeli to international media. I mean, everyone at some point is broken off. People of the State Department resign in protest because we can't allow this to continue. Only so much you can ignore. But it says, which was labeled by Gazans as a death trap, because it was. They were executing people coming for food. And that's what he told you. Where around 1,500 civilians were murdered after being lured towards food, after being deprived of any aid for 3 months. There was even a plot for Abu Shabaab's men to be used to rule over a concentration camp in southern Gaza, one constructed by Israel and into which it had planned to herd the population, but that didn't pan out. Remember, they were really pushing for that little controlled area. That's what they were doing. So you can literally prove this stuff today. Who they're working with, what they're connected to, and how desperate they are to make this the case. Later in August, another group propped up by Khan Yunis, called itself the Counterterrorism Strike Force. And it's led by Hussam al-Astal, a former member of the Palestinian Authority's Preventative Security Forces. You see right there, they'd go, see, Palestine. It's not the case, guys. The PA is not working for Palestine. It says its intelligence branch That's the name, the PSF is their intelligence branch, who has long been linked with the Israeli Shin Bet. All right, so the like the MEMRIs type stuff, right? They'll frame this. Go look at the Palestinian groups, but it takes half a second to find out that not every Palestinian is working on behalf of the Palestinians, just like you can't just in like any situation. It says the CSF have been accused of raiding hospitals, killing civilians, stealing aid, and looting homes. The Palestinian group we're talking about. But their primary role has been to launch raids against Palestinian resistance fighters. So what you really have is a group probably not consisting of only Palestinians, of a group that they tell you is Palestinians who ultimately are conducting things for Israel. That's not unique. Earlier this year, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was forced to admit that his backing of these ISIS-linked gangs after Israeli Knesset member Avigdor Lieberman criticized the public strategy, called it out in front of the Knesset, which that's where he said, what's wrong with that? And accused him of violating national security by pointing it out. On September 17th, Haaretz covered this, confirmed that it was Israeli support extended well beyond just arming the militants and that they were given orders directly from the Israeli chain of command. Fact. The Israeli media outlet even interviewed officers who expressed their disapproval of the use of these militants. So it's like open conversation in everywhere but the U.S. media apparatus, because they're clearly not controlling what they do. And we're out of control. It says Israeli leaders, officers, expressed their disapproval of these militants as they were out of control and potentially posed a threat even to Israeli military objectives. See, this is important. This is a kind of a collapsing situation. Now it says, both the Popular Forces and CSF are directly connected with one another. Both are granted cash, weapons, and control of territory under Israeli supervision in exchange for attacking Hamas on their behalf. Then came a new Israeli-backed militia with the beginning of Israel's Operation Gideon's Chariot II, otherwise known as the failed attempt to occupy Gaza City. This militia is led by Ashraf Mansi, calling itself the People's Army Northern Forces. The territory in which the Northern Gaza death squads operated was Jabalia, Bet Lahia, and areas inside Gaza City. During the Israeli military's reinvasion of Northern Gaza, these militants, along with members of certain clans, had carried out numerous operations against Palestinian resistance factions and collaborated with Israel to seize control of territory under Israel's protection. Now, any moment like any one of these moments could have been used to say, see, that's what the Palestinians are doing. Like they tried to blame the gangs for what they claim Hamas was doing during the ceasefire. But see, as these groups were taking these areas, they could argue that wasn't them. That's how this works. Now, for whatever reason, they've just done this very bluntly. But at the end of the day, this hasn't played out all the way yet. These groups are taking control of certain areas right now in Gaza. It says the United Nations reported back in August that all of the aid trucks entering Gaza, that 88% were being looted by these gangs. Yet upon the initial implementation of the so-called last ceasefire, when these three militant groups withdrew, this is very important, behind Israel's yellow line, which speaks for itself, guys, the Israel-controlled area that the ISIS-linked gangs retreated behind once this supposedly took place, right? Once the ISIS-linked gangs retreated and were hiding under their protection of Israel, the looting suddenly disappeared. Everyone testified to that, and the return of Hamas-aligned government security forces to the streets, according to UN-affiliated agencies and humanitarian aid organizations. Unfortunately, looting then proceeded to take place again when Israel began to implement its true ceasefire agenda properly, right? Organizing its collaborators to carry out a key part of the duty to help starve Gazan civilian population through aid theft. So the moment that you can clearly prove when these ISIS-linked gangs pulled away, you had a moment where aid was actually coming in. They didn't want that, so suddenly they come back in. That's where you have the argument of these gangs claiming Hamas. I mean, it's just all so obvious to verify. Now, as always, I'm not saying you can't prove that, or rather, I would say to say it more accurately. I'm not saying that there is no possible example where Hamas could have violated the ceasefire, or that Hamas, as an individual part of the group, might have gone out and done something that you could criticize. I mean, that's obvious to me. It's not in my interest to make that case right now. Like, if we could prove it, what I'm saying is to argue anything's possible is not why it pulls from the point. If I had evidence that showed Hamas was violating the ceasefire, I would report it to you like I have in the past. Right now, This is what we have. And all you have is the Israeli government yelling a narrative that we can prove is false, like we have seen 100 times so far. So understand that. It's very important to think about. And so what we can see is them using these groups to make that case. So like the same point from before, if it was just as obvious they want you to think it is, they wouldn't need to manufacture obvious deviations, ploys. Now it says, from day one of the ceasefire, Israel unleashed its ISIS-linked militias and collaborative groups against Gaza's security forces, carrying out raids, assassinations, armed robberies against civilians, and gunning down innocent people. Now, even then, they would point to the engagement with the gangs as saying, here's Hamas enforcing against the Palestinians. They did it back then. We tried to call it out then as well. In reaction to this, Hamas mobilized 2 security units created especially to deal with the ISIS-linked gangs, called them in English Arrow Unit and the Resistance Security Force, which is, that'd be the English. So Arrow Unit and the Resistance Security Force. That's the English version of their terms, along with other elements of its domestic security forces. So rolled these guys out to push back against the ISIS-linked gangs. That's what they're claiming anyway. Now it says the results were the arrest of countless collaborators, clashes resulting in high casualties among the Israeli-backed groups, and in public execution of collaborators carried out on film. So even Robert's reporting that the execution that they played said it was innocent Palestinians were people that were part of the ISIS-linked gangs that were working for Israel. Now, you can look into the information. I think we've already given you enough to make that case very clear, but question it. Do your own due diligence. Pro-Israel propagandists use this chaos, along with the videos of these executions, as proof of tyrannical crackdown, claiming Hamas was killing its own people and that the civil war was afoot. The videos of the public execution against captured collaborators, along with a number of videos circulating of captured Israeli-backed fighters being beaten with metal rods, were addressed by Hamas officials to have been carried out by its elements who had taken matters into their own hands. So, but the point is, even these are examples of, I guess, what he's referring to as the Israeli-backed fighters being, what's interesting to me is you have a war going on, and even then, you shouldn't need to explain while you're fighting the other side. But even then, Hamas comes out and says, well, that wouldn't have happened if they didn't do it, which they could be lying. But I just find it an interesting, it seems one of two things. Throughout this whole process, post-October 7th, Hamas has either decided that it's obviously in their interest to constantly project that they're not what they are, or what they say they are, or they're not what they say they are. It's not hard to break this down. But either way, they have continued to, the hostages come back and say they treated us kindly, took us out for play dates at the ocean, took us shopping. Both of those are very real. Guarded their own bodies with their bodies. You can't make this stuff up. So anyway, to reiterate the point, the videos of all of that, the executions and so on, of Israel-backed fighters being beaten with metal rods as well, were addressed by the Hamas officials to have been carried out by the elements who had taken matters into their own hands. Do you think Israel's team, their military, Netanyahu, would explain why they beat up a bunch of Hamas members? It's just an odd thing. Isn't it interesting to point out? But it says whether this is true or not, that's fair to point out, these actions helped lead to multiple families whose members had begun to fight against the authorities to hand over their weapons and condemn those amongst them that collaborated with Israel. My point is just that at the end of the day, Israel has shown you what they do with people that they even guess might be working with the side they don't like, and then put them in prison for 20 years and torture and rape them. That's what we're actually talking about. What we are seeing in Gaza is at this moment, damn it, I got to remember to, hold on. That's on me. That's me missing something right there. What we are seeing in Gaza is at this moment not a battle between the security forces and a number of Gazan clans, but instead is limited to a fight between Israeli proxy groups and the Palestinian resistance factions. That's what we're dealing with, guys. So there are very clearly Palestinian support groups, and then what Israel's doing, and they're battling while trying to claim like it's something else. That's what Robert's telling you. Now, the master plan, it says, while the U.S.-Israeli agenda in Gaza began rearing its head from the outset, the agenda is now clearly manifesting itself on the ground and has been openly confessed to, piece by piece, in the public domain. Don't forget that they just told you they'd been planning this well before. Now, it says part of the plan, the Trump plan. Oh, you know what? Let me grab this really quickly, too. I hope this pops up. There it is. Look at that. So I did this interview with Robert long time ago, before he was working with TLAV. This is July 5th, 2020. And this was kind of right before, actually. I think we overlapped over the next year or so. But what this was about, I made that picture, by the way. I thought that's just a weird lens. The steal of the century, as he called it, and normalizing an openly violent ethno state. Robert did a documentary called The Steal of the Century, literally outlining how Trump's deal of the century, which is exactly what they're trying to do now, was just a ploy. It was just the same old thing called something else. And we broke it down. It's a really important one you should watch. It's a great interview. Robert has some really powerful work, always has. But interesting to think about how long this has been going on. It's not new post 2023. But part of the Trump plan, my point is the same one from before, which I probably should put that in there, has been the idea of introducing a multinational coalition force under the Gaza Strip under Israeli supervision in order to support implementing the overarching agenda. I would argue that means Greater Israel. The U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, says that he's pushing to receive UN approval for the initiative and that it would be happening as soon as possible. Like that's going to happen and like they care. They'll do it regardless, like they have every single time before it. They don't need UN. I mean, here's, you know what's funny about this? It seems like this is such a feigned move to make you think things. Like you think they're going to get UN approval before they even try to get congressional approval? This is the U.S. government, and they've not even tried to get approval from Congress, which makes all of their military actions a crime. But we're going after UN approval. They don't care about any of these things. But wait, isn't UN Hamas? Did you tell us that? I'll come back to that in a second. It says U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance admitted earlier in the week that the so-called International Security Force, their true mission will be to disarm Hamas. Remember, Trump is the one that allowed them to arm. I might be able to bring that up real quickly. What was it? There it is. Surprised I remembered that. I think this is super important because this is not getting much attention. This is on the 13th. Trump doesn't imply. He says it outright, and I'll show you the point. Trump implies Hamas given approval to act as police force for a period of time. This is important because this is being used primarily as this division. Trump says, well, Hamas is standing because they do want to stop the problems, and they've been open about it, and we gave them approval for a period of time. That's not hard to recognize, guys. So that's Trump telling you before they made this fake ceasefire that they allowed them to be the security force. That's why what you saw was them pull them back. Hamas came out and rolled out their 7,000 security forces, right? This was all planned, in my opinion. And then they were like, they won't disarm. Hamas is in control. And that was the entire point from the beginning, despite the fact that twice Hamas was offered to remove themselves entirely, and twice the U.S. and Israel reinserted them back in the deal. We all covered that months ago, because they need Hamas as the scapegoat in this conversation. But you need to understand that he gave them this approval. So as they now fret over the idea that they're still being armed, and there wasn't even like a time that they outlined, or it's like the body's point. They know the way they're playing this to make it look like they're violating it when they're the one that set this up to begin with. So here, where were we here? It says that the forces, their main mission will be to disarm Hamas. So if that's the case, then why wouldn't you just have included that in the first place? And that's what Hamas had even offered before. So they're making this as if they're the ones refusing to do what's part of the deal. This is although Vance maintains that U.S. forces will only act as supervisors. Does anybody ever buy these lies anymore in any field of war or any context? Oh, we're just standing there observing. That's just insulting to your intelligence. They don't do that anywhere. On top of that, most of these cases where they're observing are they're active participants. They just lie to make that somehow like they're, really to make it seem like they're not taking a part. But that's what, Trump's is really, especially today, he acts like he's some kind of third party, not completely immersed in the actual agenda, like the genocide here, or that any number of fields of war. Syria, for example, I'm just trying to help them resolve it. No, you're literally one of the central players, like Biden was, or whoever was tying issues for him. It says, although Vance maintains that they'll be supervising forces, that he says they'll act as supervisors to the force, and he says there won't be direct boots on the ground. That's already a lie. That was a lie before he said that. This is by no means promised. Regardless, the U.S. taxpayer will now foot the bill for the U.S. Israel-led international invasion force that is being proposed to fight against Hamas. They've organized this to go this way. And now you taxpayers in the United States are going to pay for yet another totally America First agenda. In other words, he writes, this international force will be a multinational regime change army that is used to achieve what Israel couldn't during its 2-year-long genocide in the Gaza Strip. Foreign soldiers will be sent to fight and die in order to continue the genocide. Now, you think this, just like the National Guard force, you think it's going to dissipate? No. This will become a security force. It'll become a presence that needs to be there. Look at like the North Korea lines. Like, this will be a forever reality that's exploited by people like the U.S. government in Israel. And what that will mean, most likely, is you now have a force that'll be deployed to go after other countries Israel doesn't like. Probably Lebanon after that. How much you want to bet? Meanwhile, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff have made it clear that the reconstruction in Gaza will only take place in the areas currently under the control of Israel. And of course, it's ISIS-linked extremist militias. So they're going to rebuild all these areas back here, not allow them to go back to their homes, and then what, swap with them? Like, in what world does this ever make sense when the people they claim they're doing it all for aren't even allowed to go back there or are being pushed out entirely, or that they still tell you are all terrorists? The goal, it says, according to anonymous sources speaking with Axios, is to give Palestinian civilians an alternative. Either live under extremist collaborators like the people they're propping up, like your ISIS-linked groups that work for Israel, so extremist collaborators or Israel occupying forces, so either live under that or remain inside the areas where Hamas still maintains control, likely arguing from that point forward that this then demonstrates their support for terrorism. Right? So it's like the COVID choice. You're giving somebody a false choice. You're saying, move over here and live under different occupation, which represents just the same thing that's happening before, but now with ISIS elements on top of that, or stay in the areas that we've said Hamas is in, and then we'll de facto call everyone there terrorists and then continue to kill everybody. It's not hard to see how this works. As this plan develops, the population of Gaza who live under the rule of Hamas are being deliberately starved, and scores of them are routinely killed. Over 170,000 people are currently injured that we can prove, rendering many of them in need of medical intervention and care that's simply not even possible right now in Gaza, which could be weaponized against them. It already has been. Small things like cuts and infections are killing people, guys. As for the so-called phase 2 of the ceasefire deal that keeps being discussed in the corporate media, which at this point today seems to be not even on the table anymore, there are no actual signs of progress in that regard. I don't think they ever intended to. Hamas did not agree to disarm, nor has any other of some dozen Palestinian resistance groups in Gaza. That's my point from before about Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Well, Hamas can disarm, but then you always more than one other group. You really think that's going to not be the scapegoat problem next? Obviously. And it says, asserting that they will also do so if there's a Palestinian state established. That's for all of them. Establish a Palestinian state, and that's where the transition will begin. And then they argue that we need to do all of this before we can do that. And they continue to make it seem like they're refusing their own state. It's just not what's happening. It says, during which their men will be integrated into the national security military forces as their weapons are handed over to the state. They'll never agree to that, because they'll always say it's the group that we don't want to be in charge. But democracy, at the end of the day, this was always a set up to fail. The group that you want to say you don't want to work with has to be removed, but you need to make a deal with that group to achieve that end. It's comically stupid. It has been from the very beginning. Now it says, Israel, for its part, is adamant that it will not agree to a Palestinian state, and always has been, despite the lies over the years, or even discussions regarding a process toward it, making it clear that they seek the total destruction of all Palestinian armed groups, or just all of Palestine. Now it says the positions of Israel and Hamas are irreconcilable by design. Now, that's really from one side of this, because Hamas has been, from the beginning, you can see, as even Israel's reported, the different variations going from on the 9th and the 10th, the offer for a full exchange and disarmament, that they just said no. Israel wants the complete removal of all of them and the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, and they don't. That's why they will not reconcile those differences. Hamas agrees to disarm and relinquish control over Gaza only in the event that a Palestinian state is achieved, while Israel stands staunchly against the state in any way. Knowing this full well, Israel realized that its strategy over the past 2 years has failed to inflict a decisive defeat on Hamas. Really, I argue, Palestinians, and had failed to ethnically cleanse the entire population. Therefore, Israel now works with Trump and the administration to implement its master plan that will be an entirely new phase of the overall war against the people of Gaza. Sadly, I agree. If Israel intended to allow reconstruction ever, it would not continue to destroy Palestinian homes as it is doing right now in the West Bank and in Gaza behind the Yellow Line or bombing elsewhere. If it actually sought for the violence to end, it would not be continuing to kill civilians or be using its ISIS-linked proxy forces to do its bidding while appealing to an international invasion force to take over its mission of disarming Hamas. If the Israelis wanted to withdraw from Gaza, they wouldn't be violating their own yellow line, which you could prove they are. If indeed they wanted to end the humanitarian crisis that they have created, they would not be restricting aid and developing an ultimatum plot whereby Palestinians will be forced to choose between death and fleeing their own territory. Furthermore, the Israelis are not only violating the ceasefire and using it as a convenient cloak for implementing an even more insidious agenda, they're also desperately trying to get Saudi Arabia to normalize ties with them. In order to secure Riyadh's normalization deal, they need to present the lie that the Gaza war is over and that West Bank will not be annexed. Not happening, which will be used as an excuse by Saudi Arabia as to how they helped the Palestinian people. Similarly, the United Arab Emirates claimed that it stopped the West Bank annexation when it normalized ties, which it is an obvious lie, even more so today, as they're bombing yet again in the West Bank. These normalizing Arab regimes have aided Israel in committing its genocide against the people of Gaza. And I'll tell you what, the Gaza people know that. And he continues, and have spread propaganda against Palestinians and all of their regional allies, all while posing as if they're taking the moral high ground. That's the evil I'm talking about. The governments of the U.S. and Israel are now working to implement this new master plan. If they fail in doing so, the Israelis will simply return to their more overt genocidal tactics. And instead of killing dozens of Palestinians here and there, they will continue slaughtering over 100 people a day as they were prior to October 10th. Very well done. Realistically, guys, how do we not all see this? How in the world is this not the most obvious part of the conversation? I believe it is. It's hard to know for sure. As Elon Levy put out, this guy still somehow is out there doing things. It's hilarious to me. Clearly getting very little engagement, though. This is what's funny. Look at how much views and look at how much engagement. Like, these people have lost control. Like, it's just so funny to me. Look at that. 245,000 followers. And look at that. 245,000 views. It's almost like they're all bots. And on top of that, not even engaging. But see, that's how there should be some connection to that. Anyway, this complete clown comes out and says Gaza is now divided into Hamas Gaza and Free Gaza. Not a penny of reconstruction must go to the Hamas area. So all they did was like they just set up the same circumstances, but the yellow line forward. Nobody honest should be able to call. I mean, it should be the easiest thing in the world to see. And as Ryan Grimm points out, calling the part of Gaza occupied by Israel the Free Gaza is incredible. There's enough honest people out there, guys, to be able to call this out. Ryan Grimm also points out that the Washington Post posted the article we talked about. The White House shared this. So the White House, on top of it all, shared a post that they claim was written by an ISIS-linked guy. That's how ridiculous this is today. But the Washington Post shared an op-ed written by Abu Shabab, the gang member, from multiple accounts. Now, remember, Robert points out that he's not literate in English, let alone Arabic. So the argument that he wrote this is highly doubtful. But even so, it says Post then replied with a gift link. The op-ed was pitched by a pro-Israel PR firm. Israel backed these gangs. The rot is so deep. My Gaza is ready for peace. Hamas is trying to destroy it. Wow. Like, this is just crazy. We're literally watching ISIS gangs write articles for the Washington Post. ISIS groups control Syria, and they're literally, I mean, it's just like, this is so, how did we get here where we can see so clearly what's happening? I mean, it comes back to the same point that I'm always talking about. They know we see it. They know the majority sees it, and they don't care because they don't need you to do what they're doing. And that's never been more clear. And if we continue to stand by and let it grow, we won't be able to stop it. Now, I'll include the articles I did about this. Israel was always going to violate the ceasefire, which we can clearly see, as ISIS-linked gangs continue their Gaza killing, as well as the one I mentioned earlier. Israel continues bombing Gaza during ceasefire, and Netanyahu aims to swap ISIS-linked gangs for Hamas. Now, this is important. A little bit of a long clip, but I think it's important for you to see. This is in the UN. Now, I'm not saying blindly trust the UN, but I'll even grab this as well, just to make the point. The idea that we can have and this is a fraction of the doctors around the world from every other country, like some people that are in Gaza, but we're not even mentioning those, even though we should. Like in this context, the point is just international doctors not from Gaza that are telling you exactly what the doctors in Gaza are telling you are happening. They're raping and murdering and executing and targeting children in the genitals, guys. I mean, it's one after another for a very long thread. All of them telling you what they know Israel's doing, that there's no Hamas in the hospitals, that they're literally just kidnapping doctors and torturing people and burying bodies and stealing organs. It's outrageous how clear this is. So here's a clip of the UN. It is the UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, who's telling you what's going on the ground. Now, whether or not he says this, you can prove this is what's happening. It's just crazy to think about. And as usual, as he's saying this, you got the Israeli ambassador scrolling on his phone, like to make a point. We just don't even care what you have to say. And then recognize where we currently are with what Netanyahu is doing. This, guys, we are in a time of true evil.
I now give the floor to Mr. Tom Fletcher.
Oh, and I will make the point before we get into it. Like I said before, that's why I'll come back to it. Tell me again why he's even there, right? Why is that Israeli ambassador sitting right there under Israel? Why is he even there? Aren't you guys the one that tell us that UN is Hamas? Are you guys the one that tell you that they're completely anti-Israel? Okay, so why would you even take part in a process that you keep telling us is completely broken and doesn't matter? Because it doesn't, and it does. Right? I agree that UN is a very problematic thing in general. And I very much over the years have pointed out how it is completely controlled, largely by the US and Israel, but can be that from any point. But I've always also pointed out the importance, I think, of having the lens, to have a situation where you can have all these different people sit there in that circle, all of which probably have their own agendas, probably not for their own people, but have that conversation. It's sort of like a check and balance part for like the US dynamic. When I saw Evo Morales stand up and scream about to lay out the agenda, and at that point I said, look, get ready. Look at Pompeo staring at him. There's a regime change coming, and lo and behold, that's what happened. The point, though, is that that's not the UN structure. That's just individual governments and people speaking up, and yes, question all of them. But there is an importance to that. And I think we're seeing that by the way this is playing out around Israel. My point, though, is for him to sit there and tell you like it's meaningless and then, that they're all Hamas and then sit there and take part just shows you how desperate, how vulnerable they truly are.
Mr. President, members of the Council, briefing you again on this subject is a grim undertaking. Before starting, I ask you to reflect for a moment on what action we will tell future generations we each took to stop the 21st century atrocity to which we bear daily witness in Gaza. It is a question we will hear sometimes incredulous, sometimes furious, but always there for the rest of our lives.
One more thing to add to is that, you can completely remove the word genocide. It is one. That's one of the most obvious parts of the conversation, but call whatever you want. I mean, the argument, this is where it gets so unnerving to then for the people that want to argue it's not a genocide, but then go all the way to the side and say it's not even, there's not starvation. There's no war crimes. That's not even what's happening. It's just evil Hamas and killing people on October 7th. It's so completely disconnected from what literally everyone can see. It's just desperate. But my point is you can remove, he doesn't say genocide. Nobody can deny the amount of war crimes that have carried out by the US and Israel in such a short, the amount of bombs they've dropped, the amount of people they've killed, the open admissions from people on their dancing TikTok videos, the vote to rape people. I mean, my God, this whole thing has completely broken down in front of them. So just recognize you can dispute the genocide all you want, the term, the word. There's no denying what this is. The world sees it.
We will surely all claim to have been against it. Maybe we will say we issued a statement, or that we trusted that private pressure might work despite so much evidence to the contrary. Or pretend that we thought a more brutal military offensive had more chance of bringing the hostages home than the negotiations which brought so many hostages home. Maybe some will recall that in a transactional world, we had other priorities. Or maybe we will use those empty words, we did all we could. Mr. President, let me start with what we see and are mandated by this council to report. Israel is deliberately and unashamedly imposing inhumane conditions on civilians in the occupied Palestinian territory. For more than 10 weeks, nothing has entered Gaza, no food, medicine, water, or tents. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have again been forcibly displaced and confined into ever-shrinking spaces, as 70% of Gaza's territory is either within Israeli militarized zones or under displacement orders.
70%.
As my colleague from the FAO will explain, every single one of the 2.1 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip face the risk of famine. 1 in 5 face starvation. Despite the fact that you have funded the food that could save them. The few hospitals that have somehow survived bombardment are overwhelmed. The medics who have somehow survived drone and sniper attacks cannot keep up with the trauma and the spread of disease. Even today, the European Gaza hospital in Khan Yunis was bombed again, with even more civilian casualties reported. I can tell you from having visited what's left of Gaza's medical system that death on this scale has a sound and a smell that does not leave you. As one hospital worker described it, children scream as we peel burnt fabric from their skin.
Ugh. It's just so horrible. Every single part of it. Now, I'm gonna leave it there for the moment because I'm realizing we're longer than I wanted today, and I want to cover the last part, which we're going to go more into the next show about Venezuela and a lot of things. It's just so overwhelmingly obvious, and how his point about, that he knows that within that room that they all see it, and that some of them were secret, quiet pressure was going to work. So even then, it's compromised, guys. It's compromised. And so this is Benjamin Netanyahu, October 27th. It says less than 1.5 to 1 ratio, no genocide, no famine, lots of lies. Closing the book on the genocide, deliberate starvation. They're literally they're coming out and going, not only is it not, it doesn't exist. There is no genocide. There is no famine. That's Benjamin Netanyahu's account, guys. And if you look at that, 8.3 thousand. Do you realize how little growth they're getting right now? Nobody is on their side right now. And even the false bot system is still making it look like they're getting engagement. I could be wrong about that. But I just said, now listen to the speech. It's just disgusting where we are. These people are the villains of our time. Now, let's not forget, by the way, I do want to shout out these politicians. This conversation, your daily reminder that a third-generation American citizen who is now being illegally held in Israeli prison has been there for 7 months or more. No one in the supposed America First administration, not one of them has said a word. Not Donald Trump, not Marco Rubio, not Pam Bondi, not Kash Patel, not Bongino. Sounds like I'm losing my voice all of a sudden. I just can't get past that. It is so conspicuous. So the point I want to highlight here, this is from the article I recently saw from the 22nd. U.S. lawmakers urge Donald Trump to secure the release of an American teen in Israel. Group of 27 Congress members call for the release of Mohammed Ibrahim, 16 years old, born in Florida, third generation, held in Israel detention centers. But here's the crazy thing. The people like Eric Dougherty and Laura Loomer and the rest will probably tell you he's a Muslim, so he shouldn't be here. Even though he was born here, third generation, family was born here. Look at his name. He must hate you and your freedom. What the hell, guys? I can't even believe we're talking about this stuff. The point to show you on this is that this is U.S. lawmakers standing up finally and saying, why haven't we cared for 7 months? Even they should have said something before 7 months went by. Can you guess who stood up and said something? Let's take a look at the 27 lawmakers. Take a look at that. Now, in no way am I suggesting that this means they're on the right side. That's never what that means. One of them with independent, but caucuses of Democrats. Every single one of them are Democrats. Every one of them. How does that possibly make sense to you? Now, I think it behooves everyone to start to look at this through the lens of that there is not really two parties when it comes to your government. So, what we have now, just like the Democrats going like, expose the Epstein list. I don't think any of them want that. But they know that they can push right now because they're not the one on the hook to do it. And they probably know that Trump's never going to allow it to happen. So they can make it look like they're the ones. Same exact thing here. So they vote very easy to go do something, Trump, to say, go do something about the kid. They could just as easily stand up and scream, make a big deal and go to Israel. But they're not doing that because I don't think they care. I don't think they care about the American citizen. I don't think they care that Israel does what it wants to American citizens. I think they want to look like they do. What I'm trying to point out more than anything to reach the people that need to hear it the most is that out of all of these grandstanding people that will pretend they care, not even one of them is a Republican. Not even willing to pretend. Why? Because they're currently in the position to do something about it. And they don't want to buck Israel. They don't care about American citizens where Israel's concerned, let alone ever, if you really understand our government. I think if you're a Republican and you're in America first, which you should be, and you can recognize that your team, let's just say the Republicans, if you think it's like that, aren't even speaking up, let alone choosing to vote for some kind of action when an American citizen is held illegally in a foreign prison for 7 months. Imagine if that was your son. Imagine if that was your brother. Do you think Trump would care then? Clearly not. Doesn't matter. I mean, it's so in your face. Bring it up. Yeah, of course. Look, very clearly, September 29th, 4,000 views. I'll retweet that every day for the next 6 years, and I'll probably get 1,000 more views. So, I'll include some of these. We're just going to briefly go through it, and then let's finish with Venezuela. Liam Cunningham has been constantly calling Zionism out for a while now. He posted this one. Israel forces bulldoze a Palestinian school while students are still inside the building. This scene, this isn't a scene from history. It's happening right now. This is what they're doing to Palestinians. And as Liam says, this is Zionism. He sees it. And you realize this is what they're doing everywhere, guys. I mean, these children are screaming in the building. There's no legal reality here. They just covet the territory, so they have to move because they're not they're lesser than. Even Ethiopian Jews that live in a supposed state for the Jews are considered lesser than, because we're dealing with Zionists. But if you want to look at the longer thread, he's posted stuff like this many times. Here's one you probably saw recently. This guy's broken, crying, because they stole his harvest, took everything he had, all of the olive trees. In many cases, they burn them down, they uproot them. They do anything to stop them. A Palestinian grandfather cries after Zionist settlers destroyed his olive groves and stole his olives in the West Bank. Sometimes these things have been in their family for generations, and they completely destroy everything they own, everything. And then later they come back and they burn their house down. It's just so wild what we're dealing with, and people in the team sport arena from both sides don't seem to care. Here's the, I'm forgetting his name all of a sudden. Oh, there, Dr. Mark Perlmutter. He says, the testimony of a Jewish American doctor exposes unimaginable cruelty. Israeli soldiers tied up 2 Palestinian children, buried them alive. Their innocent cries were silenced beneath the dirt. This is an American doctor who's screaming about this. I've shown you clips from him more times than I can count. It's overwhelming. Next one. You've seen this one too, I think. BM posted this on the 24th. This is a rabbi in Israel. Each of us, whether you're a civilian, a soldier, a police officer, a Shin Bet, or a Mossad agent, he says, if you see them and you have even the smallest legal excuse, empty 2 magazines on them, not just one. That's not a man of God. That's a disgusting, evil person. Prominent genocidal rabbi Samuel Eliyahu, how do you say that? I don't know. Eliyahu father of Minister of Heritage, calls Israelis to murder any recently released Palestinian captive they see on the street. With a smile on his face. Yes, Liam, I agree. This is Zionism. I mean, you can easily prove that not every Jewish person believes that, but you can clearly start to recognize the synergy, the consistency of the Zionist mindset. Plenty of these. 2 little girls, no feet, no family, just tears, where laughter should be. Each of them missing a limb. Right? That's what's going on in Palestine. Gaza girl cries seeing journalist who resembles her father. The Palestinian girl in Gaza teared up after meeting this journalist who reminded her of her father who was killed by Israeli bombs. Occupying settlers steal the home and the bed and just literally empty out the person's house after they were expelled from Wabu Adu Hassan in the city of Hebron, Palestine. Yeah, so they kick them out and they steal everything they have. And nobody does anything about it because the IDF is on the side of the settlers. A heartbreaking scene captured by an Israeli drone September 10th shows thousands of starving Palestinians deprived by Israel desperately scrambling for aid trucks to feed their families. Oh, and there was one down here at the bottom. Worth pointing this out, going back to the censorship point of it all. Check this out. Look at that one. The post is unavailable. Well, technically the post is not unavailable, but I show you this often, which is why you should post the link and not just retweet. The post is there. What's interesting is clearly it's so suppressed, they don't even want you looking at the tweet where they've removed the other tweet. Think about how wild that is. You know why? Because Twitter has deleted the footage. They still give you a link to the Telegram side of it. So I'll include that for you. Make sure you see what they clearly don't want you to see. It's going to be disgusting footage of what they're doing, blowing apart dead body people. They're killing Palestinians. The point, though, is they don't delete the tweet. They just remove the content, guys, because they're trying to suppress the flow of information. They don't want you seeing what Liam writes is Zionism. Look, hey, suddenly it's there now. Watch this. Oh, now it's gone. What a coincidence. Now, I will, just for time in general, I'm going to be talking about this more. I highly recommend you check out. We didn't even plan to focus on the Venezuela point, but I just started off as I kind of have been lately with interviews. Like, Dave, what's on your mind? What right now? What's the first thing that you're thinking about? And he went into Venezuela. So we kind of focused on for most of the discussion. The title was The Impending U.S. Regime Change in Venezuela and the Rising Global Agenda. It's really a great conversation. We get into a lot of different things, including, like I said, the parts of Gaza and Israel and the ISIS-linked gangs. But what's going on with this Venezuela thing is just wild. And I think I might just do a solo focus on this for other things going forward, because it just needs to be discussed, like involving the full picture. So much of what happens today is so reactionary to the current moment, instead of bringing in, with Iran, going back to Operation Ajax and the different attempts to regime change, or in Venezuela, the same point. Go back to Hugo Chavez and look at the many different intelligence operations and efforts to kill him, and really what they were trying to accomplish had nothing to do with freedom. It's not new, guys. Check out this interview. I think it's very well done in regard to what Dave brings to the table, and that's to pat myself on the back, but I think that the conversation was really, really interesting. I also make this point in the discussion, but I don't think we can't miss this. And this goes on. This is for every real problematic element. The immigration part of it, but this is for the Venezuelan part. Stephen Miller, this is on September 29th, mind you. Now look at where we are. Stephen Miller takes leading role in strikes on alleged Venezuelan drug boats, right? So this Zionist is clearly driving this country to collapse. It feels like that to me. But today, yet again, in case you missed it, Hegseth comes out again and says they just bombed 4 more vessels. No evidence. They just go, 8 terrorists were killed. That's it. They don't give you any information. There's no legal reality for why they should even be able to bomb ships in the middle of the international waters without any evidence. This is unprecedented in every possible way. And now one of these would have been crazy. But there's been 40 people, 15 ships. They're just going rapid fire. They're trying to make a point here, guys. This is wild. So this is illegal. That's the point to take away from this. There's no world in which what they're doing right here is legal. In any context, not internationally, not from the U.S. perspective. They're just pushing the envelope. So look, they can do what they want because we can. Challenge me. That's what they're doing. And if you do, they come after you. If you're a judge, they try to do everything they can. If you're a politician, they try to, it's a not necessarily different than before, but to a degree that is very, very much elevated. So here, a couple other points before we play some clips. See another one of these guys. I've never heard of this guy. 1.3 million. What, he's on Clay and Buck. Oh, it's with Clay Travis, I guess. Anyway, the point is, he posts this. Associated Press says U.S. carried out 3 strikes on 4 alleged drug-running boats in Eastern Pacific. Hexes said it killed 14 people. 1 survivor, which they'll probably repatriate because they don't want you to hear what he has to say. This guy says, the FAFO foreign policy in effect. God, we are dealing with children. F around and find out? What are you, kindergarten? I mean, this is so embarrassing. These people are the meme PR generation, like what you're doing. I don't mean like in like a generation sense, really. Like of the where age you were born in. It's like this weird political category of people that are like, it's the kind of person that's going out there and wanting to make fun of people suffering, dunking on the other side because look at how dumb they are, even though anybody with a brain who's an adult in the room can recognize that both sides of the partisanship are identical today. But the F around and find out. So what your argument is, the F around is people doing things in national water that we can't verify? Or, the F around is what? You blindly trusting the government like a complete follower? Or, you're fighting the deep state by blindly trusting what the government tells you? Good thinking, man. Very intelligent, 1.3 million followers. This is what you deal with in partisan blinded coverage. F around and find out. Like you're talking about war crimes. You're talking about provable examples of people that were very known fishermen, people that were let go without any crimes, that even Colombia let go because there was no evidence. These people are killing people, and your response is F around and find out. Again, the children in the room. Here is a good point from Mimi, who says, I like to point out that Biden was laying out the groundwork for this. He put out $30 million reward for the arrest of Maduro at the end of his term. Imperialism is a bipartisan position. See, anybody with a brain and willing to stand back and look has already seen this. The argument now, even from the Trump administration, is sort of like that Biden allowed this somehow and he didn't really push hard enough. It's just, you have to always make it a counterbalance, because if you recognize that it's the government doing it, well, suddenly it changes the whole game. When this person says maybe Trump should have a little talk with the CIA since they're the world's largest drug traffickers. Yes.
Pretty amazing. But we have the Gulf of America, and there are very few boats, very, very few boats.
By the way, very quickly, I never really commented on this, but how embarrassing was it that they literally tried to sue the AP, Associated Press, for refusing to force their people to call it the Gulf of America? Again, that's why, when I say this, it's not like I'm just trying to be insulting. It's a childish thing we're dealing with. These people are acting like children. Like you're literally the kind of kid that you'd be like, shh, quiet down. You're a little out of control. Like in a classroom. Like these people are the ones that are being ridiculous. My point here is that what world is that? Like the effort, it's all about you know what it is? Again, flooding the zone. See, even in the show, I can forget how, the bottom line is trying to force them to call it that is so dumb. It makes me uncomfortable. They're like, what are you doing? You're so embarrassing. And they lost on top of that. It's insane. But I never really commented on that. It just shows you what nonsense we're dealing with today.
Of America, and there are very few boats, very, very few boats, not even fishing boats, to be honest. I don't want to do that to the fishing industry, but it's...
See how funny that is? Oops, I forgot we had to change the narrative, right? Because he's been doing that in every one of the interviews. There's no boats, there's no one around. He's basically going, look how good I did. Like almost kind of flaunting it in faces of people who know it's a crime. Like there's not even anybody. Look at that. And then, oops, that's right. Last time I said that, it made it look clear that I was hurting everybody, not just terrorists, if that's even who's there. So he adds a little on top. Just, oops, that's right. That's a dumb thing to say. I mean, it's easy to point out.
To be honest, I don't want to do that to not even fishing boats, to be honest. I don't want to do that to the fishing industry, but...
Too late.
It's been so effective. And our sea drugs, as they call them, they use the term sea drugs, the drugs...
Who in the world says sea drugs? Am I wrong? I mean, who knows? Maybe it's a word that I don't know because it's only in certain circles, but I laughed out loud when I heard that. I think my opinion is probably something Trump just blurted out loud, then been like, that's the thing that we use. Now it becomes a thing. Watch as Eric Dougherty and Posobiec and Benny Johnson and now all start calling it sea drug, sea drug, sea drug, sea drug, then it becomes a thing. Or I'm wrong. It's such a meaningless point. I just think it's funny to me. Sea drugs just sounds stupid. It's redundant. They're drugs that happen to be on the sea. Stupid.
And our sea drugs, as they call them, they use the term sea drugs, the drugs coming in by sea, are like 5% of what they were a year ago, less than 5%.
Do you realize they've never even proven that they've done anything other than kill people in boats, and already been caught lying more than once about it? But yet suddenly you've saved millions of lives? Kind of a stretch there, bud.
So now they're coming in by land, and even the land is concerned because I told them that's going to be next. You know, the land is going to be next. And we may go to the Senate, we may go to the, Congress and tell them about it. But I can't imagine they'd have any problem with it. I think, in fact, while we're here, I think it's a good idea, Pete. You go to Congress, you tell them about it. What are they going to do? Say, gee, we don't want to stop drugs?
God, sometimes it just makes you wonder if he really have any idea what's going on, right? Is he just like calling Netanyahu to know what he should do tomorrow? Like, how insane that is. First of all, I highly doubt they do that at all. That's a floated statement to make you think they're going to do anything. They'd already bombed these boats. You think they're going to go to them to get more approval for something they've already done that they didn't ask approval for in the first place? It's a crime. I'll play these clips for you next from even Rand Paul, who's a Republican, and that's why they hate him, because he calls these things out like Massey does, that these are crimes, not debatable, 100% objective violations of both U.S. and international law. But, let's just go ahead and ask them, what are they going to do? Say no? Yes. And then let's just even say they do that. They'll go, see, they're just Democrats who hate us. Again, all of that may just be aimed at the smallest percent of the conversation that they pretend is everybody. Maybe I'm wasting my time even talking about it. That's what I'm grappling with lately. But overall, he said the land. Guys, it's not secret that this is going to increase. Regime change for Venezuela was even basically floated by numerous people. It is coming, at least as the narrative seems to build. They've been going after this for a long time, but important to include, Jason Bassler, both the U.S. State Department and the DEA confirmed that Venezuela, quote, it plays no role in the production of trafficking of fentanyl into the United States. How do we get lost in these moments? You realize that's the U.S. Trump administration who's telling you there's zero connection here. And yet the major line from screaming people online is, you care, Trump just said in that interview, we saved all the lives of the drug. It's not happening from Venezuela. And that's the point. They're claiming this is about Venezuela and Maduro. So if you think right now it's about drugs, watch as this shifts into Venezuela and they stop caring about drugs. Watch. My opinion, I could be wrong. Maybe that's important for their ongoing agenda. My prediction is this is going to shift into full-blown Venezuela under the guise of the drug point, and then just drop the point about the drugs when they focus on regime change. Because that's how broken this thing is. I'm doing this long enough to watch how quickly these people can lose. I think it's because they don't think you'll see it. Maybe because they're lost. I don't know. But as Daniel McAdams writes, Venezuela, fentanyl, Iraq, WMD. 100%. And then this point, too, is just so embarrassing. Jack Posobiec comes out and says, what is this again? I forget the name of it. It's meant to be kind of like the conscientious objector, the guy standing up and going, like the rational thing is what this image is supposed to represent. Jack even changes his face to represent him. Or someone did it, but it's just a narcissist. The point, we should keep killing the drug dealers. Like that's the rational thing that no one else is saying, except that's literally what all of you morons are screaming. And the rational conversations. See, this is what's so funny about it. I was just joking about the Confederacy of Dunces this morning, the book, and the reality of how that's what these people are. And they love to, so in this case, you're framing yourself as the one lone free thinker saying the thing no one's allowed to say or able to say. That is what most of you are saying. What's being removed and not pointed to are people like us going, but hey, maybe that's a crime. Hey, maybe both sides are involved. So it's so funny to watch them frame themselves like this is the equivalent of you going, I'm the rebel fighting the deep state, while you literally support the deep state and then suppress rebels. That's what they do. And I said, meanwhile, Jack cheers Trump's numerous deals with Pfizer. Moron. Keep the drug dealers down, but keep those shots coming that we all pretended to fight when it was Biden. All of them are like this, guys, in the team sport politics arena. Now, this is not unique to MAGA, even though this is where Mediason points to it. This is constantly happening to whatever current, agenda narrative manager we're dealing with. This person who has, let's see, what was it again? 29,000 followers, and you look for this image. Every million follower account out there is, to one degree or another, is promoting something like this. And it says, we can agree that thieves or excuse me, that there is a fair debate as to whether we ought to bomb these guys. But you should be beaten senseless if you try to convince me that this is a boat full of innocent fishermen. Okay. Too bad that picture is from 2012, and you can easily look it up. So 6.3 million views. This guy's got 29,000 followers. You don't think there's a weird thing going on this platform? It's because this is the thing. You're supposed to point to the thing. And he said the thing that you're all supposed to share. They all repeat it. And the point is that 6 million views becomes, look at this. This guy goes, the photos from 2012. The guy who posted it says, so is your mom. They're not honest actors, guys. But it doesn't change the 6 million people, and let's just say the 6.2 million who didn't recognize he was lying, and then go on to share it, or go on to hold this point in their mind when they talk to you later on a different show and go, yeah, but they're not really fishermen. And they're thinking of something that is provably false. I just pointed this out with this guy who literally got caught and then reposted it after he deleted the first one using the exact same posting, meaning, and then got fact checked on that too. Whether these are bots or organized elements or just people out there who want to watch the world burn, this is a huge part of the conversation. So this guy, who knows if he knows he's wrong or not? Either way, he left it up, even though people told him he's wrong. I mean, weirdly, check this out. 42,000 likes and 6 million views. Let's just for sake of conversation, let's check out the quotes real quick. Oh, good. It looks like some people are pointing it out. Not with big followings and not with a lot of shares, of course. Yeah, some people are. Look at that. Good for them. Tin Eye, Michael Tracy. I'm trying to get the ones where right now it's a lot of calling out because it's been circulating for since the 23rd. And so everyone's gotten wind of the fact that it's a false image, and he still leaves it up and still calls people out for, that shows you this guy is not in it for anything other than reach. But you scroll down, you'll find a lot of large people who are sharing it because they're repeating it, just like this guy. Oh, wait, before we go past it. This is what Mehdi has said. He said, MAGA can't exist without existing in a bubble of fake stories. Well, guess what, Mehdi? That's the same exact thing for the left side of the conversation. And it says, and fake images and manufacturing hysteria. What he's talking about is the partisan game within the government control problem. They lie so much they can no longer exist without the lies. Now, can I admit that there's it's over the top? Yes. Right now, more than I've ever seen. Now, go back a step. During the COVID-19 timeframe in Biden's administration, could we not all agree that that moment was the most intense at least in my experience, I've never seen it. It's incrementally getting worse. So until we can look back and recognize that ultimately whoever comes next is going to gain whatever they're doing now. It's not going to be like, if Trump then fights to be ruler forever, well, then that'll clearly make the case. And I wouldn't even disagree. I can sense that too. My point, though, is that I don't think it's different than any other person, any other, element of this government control structure. And so what he's pointing to, I think, is objectively clear about the same partisan left-right team sport game. But the point is, that's a lie. It's an old picture being used with 6 million views to convince people that we should be murdering fishermen. This guy, like I said before, tweeted this out under the U.S. Homeland Security News, got fact-checked by it, got millions and millions of reach on it, and I screenshot it just to be sure, just in case he deleted it. And I said, I told you they deleted it, which suggests that they basically just parroted it from other people they saw, right? But then he went and shared it again and used a new picture of a completely different boat with 4 engines and then just wrote the exact same thing. Colombian president's a liar. These aren't fishermen. And got fact-checked again using a 2024 image. I mean, couldn't you even use a picture from 2025? It's an industry right now. And the people we constantly point to use it, like they use the MEMRI Israeli propaganda channel. So this is Alex Jones, unsurprisingly going, yay, regime change in Venezuela, because he's a part of the team today. Trump has made his decision to overthrow the communist government. It's again, the idea that you act like one form or another of government is the problem. This is what David Icke gets very clearly. It's government, guys. It's government. The problem is that they make it about one thing versus the other. What do the Venezuelan people want? Who cares what they want because we've decided communism bad? It's government. All government can consolidate at the top, like we're literally watching as these guys pulled all their punches. But David Icke says, people are saying you've sold out to the deep state, Alex Jones, because you have. That's what he wrote. Everything you once railed against is now good so long as Trump does it. That's objectively clear. And he says here, he's okay with the military invasion of Venezuela. keep blowing the boats up, he says, while Trump and his fantastic fascistic regime provide no evidence. Look, you may agree that should happen if you can prove their drug, but the point is, even then, it's still a crime. It's just like talking about every other conversation. You can't claim that collective punishment is not a crime because you've got a narrative. Same thing here. The point is that you have to prove that. Even then, it would be a crime. But let's just say you could prove they were drug traffickers. At least then we could have an argument about whether that this is not even being proven. So this is Alex Jones acting like he's fighting the government, deep state, whatever, the journalist breaking through, who's literally blindly parroting what the government said and then going, rah, rah, do it more. That's pretty embarrassing from anybody's perspective. He goes on to say, he's so deluded he actually drones on as if the reason to regime change is really drugs. Stomach turning. It is wild. Now, here are two clips. I'll play this one already, but I want to play for you, and then we'll wrap up pretty much. I think there's only a few more tweets I want to show. A couple more clips, actually. But this is David Icke said, this is what Alex Jones should be saying if he were really against the deep state tyranny. In no way from either him, I would argue, but myself, and most importantly, are we arguing this person is fighting the deep state? I don't believe that. I don't believe that's what he's saying. The point is simply that even this person it's such the surface level argument that this is so obviously a crime and so obviously unjust that even the Fox News person's going, that's a problem. And yet the guy fighting the deep state is the one going, yay, rah, go more regime change, go more authoritarian regime change control, steal the resources, kill innocent people. Don't prove any of it. Call it out.
Well, I think that there's always a choice, and you're right about the demand issue, and I wish that we could do more about that. And this has been going on forever, that we have a drug consumption problem here.
Which is not your decision to make, or the government's. The idea that we ever allow people, this is what's so crazy. That's not in line with liberty. That's not in line with the Constitution. They don't care. They've been violating that their entire career, their entire lives, it seems. But just recognize the core point. That they're telling you you're not allowed to decide for yourself what you want to consume. And therefore we have to murder people. It's completely illogical.
Drug supply problem coming from South and Latin America. So I totally.
And again, in case you missed that first part, that's not really what's happening. There is not the fentanyl issue with Venezuela. And so it's just a manufactured element to go after Venezuela is what it very clearly is developing into. We'll get to the points again where they're saying regime change. That's where this is aimed at.
That. But when you're looking at how this fight is being executed at this particular moment, it doesn't make a lot of sense. First and foremost, the fact that no one can confirm that we've actually been taking out narco traffickers or huge drug traffickers, however you want to say it. And last week when we were talking about this, Dana had just seen the alert that the admiral in charge of the Southern Command had resigned.
Again, how much can we ignore? How many people can go, this is wild, I can't even do this anymore? People that were Republican, people that were appointed by Trump, just like last time. Again, it's willful ignorance to not acknowledge that at the very least is a red flag.
And he was the one who was in charge of this. And the reporting is that he wasn't comfortable with the mission and had been pushing back within the Pentagon. And do you think he would have resigned if everything was by the book? So we have.
Now, we should assume that. We should find out what does he have to say, whether he ever wants to speak on it or not. Probably not with where the climate is. But he could have resigned for some other reason. That's being objective. But again, since we know that it is a problem, since we know it's a crime based on the law, that this guy then resigns right before it saying he's uncomfortable, I think it's pretty clear what you can suss out from that. But again, we have all the examples of the State Department people in the FDA, people in the CDC, all across the board from Trump and Biden's last administrations where they're telling you they are doing the wrong thing and I can't be a part of it anymore. Both of which relate around the genocide and they all support.
32 people that have been killed so far, 7 individual strikes. We know that the Colombian president is alleging at least that an innocent fisherman was murdered. We know that there's a family from Trinidad who's saying that a member of their family was killed. And then it is really important that we have repatriated 2 people, one to Colombia, one to Ecuador, because that indicates that we don't have any evidence to prosecute them, that we didn't know who these guys were. Because if you did have evidence.
Or that they didn't want to. Like maybe they are drug traffickers and the point was not about trying to make this come to any possible conclusion. Just like I said with the immigration part or with El Salvador, like there's very provable evidence right? That they like with Garcia, for example. Like, it's funny how little attention this still gets, even though there was a new reporting about it. Like, there is a very clear deal that was made between Bukele and the Trump administration in regard to exchanging prisoners that Bukele did not want to testify in U.S. courts, who knew that there was a deal made between Bukele and MS-13. It's not a secret. It's like very public, in fact. It just doesn't get covered by the screaming people on top and the mainstream alternative media apparatus. So overall, same thing here. They get it out of the way because there is no crime other than what they're doing, and they don't want that to be part of the conversation. This is what illegal pundits are pointing out. You know, like, or take one more example. The idea of the leaders, MS-13 leaders, more than one, in fact, it's the same overlapping point to what they did with the deal with Bukele, but instead of charging the guy, it was one of the earliest ones before that deal really became a focal point. Right in the beginning, Pam Bondi was like, we've got MS-13 leader we're going to send back to El Salvador. I was like, you've been prosecuted. You were like just about to make this case because it was going on before they got to this point. And they just drop it and send him to El Salvador? One was because he was going to testify about something that Bukele made a deal with him. And secondarily was because they want to get him out of the way. Or rather, my point that I'm making, that last part, was that if you're charging this guy with rape, I think was one of the charges, and drug overlaps, criminal gang activity, the guy was a leader of MS-13. You could put him in jail for the rest of his life. He's caught in the United States and you send him away to a place where he's literally treated like he's not a criminal. Does that sound like what should be happening? No. Same thing here, right? If this guy is actually doing what you're claiming he's doing, it's a crime. You could charge him somehow. I mean, the idea of the international part, I'm going to say that to make the point here. I disagree this should be internationally illegal in any sense. People should be able to make their choices about what they want to consume. Overall, though, they're getting rid of him because it's inconvenient for him to actually be able to, so you put him back and he goes, I'm a fisherman. I'm alive. I can testify to that. Then you can prove it. They'll still deny it. They'll call him rapist, terrorist, member of a gang like they did with El Salvador, or Garcia still to this day, despite every narrative they have being broken down by the courts. They'll do it anyway, but that's why.
You would bring them before a court. And I know that you're going to make fun of me, and I am prepared for it each and every day, but drug traffickers also have rights.
Why would you make fun of her for making an obviously correct point? Because you're not supposed to say those things from this team's side. We're so broken in this country. Well, anybody with these partisan divides, it's being abused by powerful people.
Law applies. We should have the evidence. They should be charged with something, and they should come before a court of law. And Rand Paul was on the Sunday shows this weekend, and he said to Kristen Welker, when you kill someone, if you're not in a declared war, which we are not, Congress with the war powers, you really need to know someone's name at least.
And then went on to initiate articles of impeachment. No. So lackluster for me. Like, if Rand Paul was serious, because he should be, it is a crime. It's not like there needs to be another crime to make that even, it's a crime. Begin the process. Point out that this, and look, it's not unique. Biden was doing this, Obama was doing this, but the point, if we ever want there to be some accountability with the executive branch ever again, there needs to be the initiation of some kind of process. They'll all scream political motivation. They'll all scream, but if Rand does it, if Massey does it, they'll still scream it, but it'll be different. Because we know that these needs to be held, these things, whether it's immigration, ICE, any number of overlaps. So this takes the cake for how easy it is to see. This needs to be pushed. They need to be charged with impeachment articles need to be initiated in order to at least concern them that it might happen, to maybe walk back their actions.
You have to accuse them of something. You have to present evidence. So all these people have been blown up without any evidence of a crime. They're also saying that it's about fentanyl, and people who analyze the area are saying that there's drugs that go through, but it's mostly cocaine and marijuana that are headed actually to Europe and to Africa. So the government story is not adding up.
That's so funny. I'm just reading, somebody in the chat says, she's a Fox News new Combs. Just read, she's a Democrat. You're literally making my point for me. It's just so funny. So what does that mean? Is she incorrect? Or is it that we should ignore her because she's the token Democrat on Fox News? Like, it's just, are we this easy to play? Seriously? I just am so blown away by how childishly ridiculous that this conversation can become. What she said is true. What does it matter in the context of true or false of data points, whether or not she thinks she's an alien living on Mars? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So here's another one. This is from Rand Paul. And this is on, I think this might have been the one she was referencing right here. I'll just let it speak for itself.
Somewhere where I think the two of you agree, and that's on some of the last bit of what Lucas was reporting on there about those strikes out in the sea. The president says there's going to be more information and briefing coming to Capitol Hill. Here's what he said Thursday.
You know, the land is going to be next, and we may go to the Senate, we may go to the Congress and tell them about it, but I can't imagine they'd have any problem with it. I think they're going to,
as if it's just his casual choice. We may decide to uphold the Constitution or not. Maybe not. That should be insulting to anybody who believes in these things.
probably like it, except for the radical left lunatics.
All right, so I'll start with you, Senator Paul. What do you need to hear in a briefing?
So childish.
What questions do you have?
It's not so much about a briefing, but we haven't had a briefing. To be clear, we've got no information. I've been invited.
That's the government, not even his own side. They're not giving anybody anything. That's on Fox News as well for the podcast.
To no briefing, but a briefing is not enough to overcome the Constitution.
Right.
The Constitution says that when you go to war, Congress has to vote on it. And during a war, then there's a lower rules for engagement. People.
I will also point out that that's one of the ways they manipulate this. And I know he knows this. They argue they're not at war, that it was a reactionary thing, that Trump's executive powers give them the ability to respond because there's an immediate threat to Americans because of drug trafficking. Like they patch these things together, just like with Venezuela. And in these cases, they're not even they're not going to be upheld in court, but they don't care about that right now. They don't seem to care at all, in fact. So my point is that you can make that case, but if you're not going to add that this is why they already think that doesn't apply, then all you're kind of doing is it's still a good information. But I think you can sense that I don't feel like he's really pushing this, and he should be if it is what it is, and it is. He's calling it out. This should not be something we gloss over, right? So, but again, that's what Trump is doing, and all you're doing is expanding the ability of the president of the executive branch to act unilaterally in any way they want and argue that we're in the middle of an emergency and no one else can do anything. Trump, because Article 2, I could do whatever I want, basically is what he said, damn near verbatim. It's not true. It's just crazy that we can be so constitutionally illiterate in this country when the people claiming to support it the most are the ones that don't seem to understand it right now.
People do sometimes get killed without due process. Briefing, but we haven't had a briefing. To be clear, we've got no information. I've been invited to no briefing, but a briefing is not enough to overcome the Constitution. The Constitution says that when you go to war, Congress has to vote on it. And during a war, then there's a lower rules for engagement. People do sometimes get killed without due process, but the drug war or the crime war has typically been something we do through law enforcement. And so far, they have alleged that these people are drug dealers. No one said their name. No one said what evidence. No one said whether they're armed. And we've had no evidence presented. So at this point, I would call them extrajudicial killings. And this is akin to what China does, to Iran does with drug dealers. They summarily execute people without presenting evidence to the public. So it's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that Trump has praised more than once. Remember how much he loved, what's his name? In Thai, was it, God, I can't, Duarte. God, is that his name? That's weird. I can't remember that off the top of my head. But remember, the guy was kind of bombastic, came out and was like, I'm going to execute every drug dealer. Trump was like that. Very clearly pointed to it. And was, it's just, they do not believe in the Constitution. I just don't know how much more clear we can make that, or that he can make that. But Rand Paul said no briefing, no evidence, no names. Just people blown up in the Caribbean and called drug dealers. That's not law enforcement. That's extrajudicial killing. Sort of like Soleimani, by the way. Except in that case, he was lured in under the guise of peace, which makes it far more of a crime, or just immoral. The Constitution says only Congress can declare war. Until then, these strikes are as wrong as what China or Iran does. 60 minutes. A couple more points to show you that this is just exactly what's they're making the case already for why, as Trump already said, the land, you're building this into an idea that we need to cut it at its source, even though it's not Venezuela. So it shows this is desperate. And on top of that, what we can see right now from, every one of these things, they're building this into a rational situation, right? Just like with Israel, Gaza, in this case, they're trying to convince you that this is what needs to be done to keep the American people safe. Even though it's just so abstract to make that case, the evidence doesn't back it up. There is no drug fentanyl problem or even cocaine necessarily in a small degree coming from Venezuela in the context of every other place we're talking about. Dave DeCamp, who we interviewed recently, says 60 Minutes greasing the skids for regime change war.
Is a very bad actor sitting on top of the world's largest known reserves of oil.
Oh, yeah. So it does seem to be about something other than drugs. Surprise, surprise.
Plus the critical minerals that will fuel the 21st century economy.
Rare earth elements or minerals. Lithium seems to be the largest thing, but there's plenty more than that they need. As we just talked about the building of new AI data centers, of OpenAI pushing that.
And he's in bed with our strategic competitors.
Oh, no. How dare he work with people we don't want to benefit? So he's a terrorist, right? Working with our not our enemies necessarily, but just even people that are adversarial to us in regard to business. Can't allow that. Yeah, that's pretty much the confessions of an economic hitman. Not a secret, left and right.
And how has he been able to cling to power for as long as he has?
I mean, let's be very clear. This is a criminal organization masquerading as a government.
God. You know, despite all of the evidence, though, right? And I'm not saying good guy. I think these governments are all problematic and have absolutely taken action that are to their interest at the counter, you know, against the interest of the people, for example. But Maduro and Venezuela have done tremendous amounts of things for the people, far more than you'd ever see the U.S. government do for anybody, including free, you know, they made the same point about Libya and plenty of other places. Free education, free school, free healthcare. Who cares? Terrorists. Or the idea that before they were in earnest really doing what they're doing today, Venezuela had this whole oil loan program where they were allowing other countries that were under the thumb of foreign powers like the U.S. government to take basically no interest loans on because they had so much wealth from the oil. The U.S. stopped all of that. I mean, it stole all their gold. I mean, it's just so blatant what's happening. And they're the criminal organization. I mean, you realize even Jimmy Carter and plenty of other people almost every time are there saying completely legitimate. Craig Pasta will tell you legitimate. I mean, I think it was Jimmy Carter at the time when he was there said it was one of the most up and up he's seen. Hundreds of international observers, and the only one saying no is the U.S. government. These are manipulators. Or he just doesn't know any better and he thinks he's in the know, which is a huge problem in this country. It's just not the reality. The lies about starvation, you can prove they're literally manufacturing these things and then blaming them just like they did in Iran. Any number, Guaido, they were caught in real time, literally faking these efforts, using fake humanitarian aid. Sure sounds familiar today now, doesn't it? To push in a truck full of barbed wire and wood and then bomb it with the Molotov cocktails and try to blame Maduro. Only problem was Guaido's guys got caught on film making them and throwing them. So they just moved on. And the whole Guaido thing just went away. Now you're trying to make a new guy the guy in president, or you're trying to work with Machado, who's literally asked Israel to regime change Venezuela, and that's supposed to be a legitimate government? I mean, because you can go on forever like this. And this guy sits there with a straight face and just goes, yeah, they're the bad guy. We're the good guy. Like Caitlin Johnstone's. It's really that stupid.
An individual who is under indictment for narcotics trafficking.
Yeah, from their people, from other parts of the world.
Commits human rights violations.
According to them, from other parts of the world.
Someone who has used the apparatus of the state to throw people in jail.
Oh, really? You mean like literally every government in the world? You mean like you're doing right now? This is so ridiculous. I don't ever want it to be taken, as I've said 100 times, that I'm supporting Maduro or his government. I don't support governments. I don't think they need to exist. But I'm always going to call it a lie when I see it, especially when it comes to governments lying to manufacture efforts for their own enrichment at the expense of literally everybody. Now here is another clip from, it's a similar, I don't know if it's the exact same time frame, but it's a similar conversation, also 60 minutes.
3 ways this can go, according to a lot of the people that we spoke to, which is he packs his bags and...
For the podcast, he's talking about Maduro and Venezuela. So think about this. Think about the pompous, like the idea that the what's the word I'm looking for? There's the entitlement, like that you can sit here and discuss what the outcome should be for a foreign government's leader that was put in place by its people, despite what your screaming narratives are, because you expect that to be the outcome. Israel, the U.S., and Western powers are literally manufacturing this.
Leaves, or no, according to a lot of the people that we spoke to, which is he packs his bags and leaves, or he's picked up. There's this big bounty for his arrest. So
yeah, sort of like the one they put on Jelani's head, but now he's the leader of Syria. So who knows how that's going to work out? On top of the fact that this is a U.S. government bounty on the head of a foreign leader. I mean, this is just insane. Like, these are the banana republics. What we're talking, the way the U.S. government is acting is like it's worse than just about everyone they point to, guys. This is a very problematic situation. So what you're literally saying is you're going to take him out, the leader of this country, and then scream democracy to the world because you claim he's a criminal. And in the meantime, murder a bunch of people on boats because the drug thing that really only about Venezuela. Once we get that, well, who cares about drugs anymore?
All gene-based.
Sorry, I bumped that.
His arrest, so he could be picked up. That's number two. Or he can meet his maker. It's not a question of if, but a question of when.
You mean killed? God, people are just brazen. Isn't that just crazy? Like over the top? So here is Afshin Ratsani from Going Underground. Maduro is sitting, and this is the same clip. He says former U.S. Ambassador James Story blatantly exposes the real reason why the U.S. is about to launch a regime change war in Venezuela. It isn't about narco trafficking. It certainly is not about democracy. It's about Monroe Doctrine imperial domination to steal Venezuela's resources for U.S. corporations. What is about to come is daylight robbery of the Venezuelan people. For those who think this is some problem in a distant country, eventually Washington will come for your country. And guys, that's what's happening in the United States right now. And we'll get to that to finish. But here's another clip that you should see.
Interrupting you in part one when you were talking about the, I suppose, importance of national sovereignty and sovereign armies and navies to protect Latin and Central American countries against the wrath of any Trump administration attacks. Nicaragua, I should say, has survived any of the attacks. But we were talking about Venezuela, of course.
Right. Certainly the long history of American involvement in Central and South America, goes back centuries. But, certainly the modern history of it is quite bloody, quite ugly, and shows the length to which the American governments will go to maintain dominance in the Western Hemisphere, and that won't change, militarily. The point I was reaching for was the idea that there need to be other mechanisms in the world available to, if not preclude, then to punish or at least provide some consequences to the Americans for actions if regime change occurs in Venezuela and if it goes the way that history tells us it will. So it'll look like the other regime change operations throughout the history in not just, in Central America and South America, which are legion. We know how that's going to go. And so how do you at least punish the Americans for it? And I think you see a point with that, where the American economy is dependent upon other sources. The American economy.
Yes, the U.S. government runs on the blood of other nations. How long have I said that? Now, it's an analogy. You're talking about not just blood, but it's the point about the blood is how you're gaining all of these resources. Literally can't exist without the war state, guys. That's not what Americans want. Every poll shows you otherwise. That's what the government wants. Sure as hell shows you the government's acting unilateral, or opposite, contradictory to what American people want. Sure as hell seems to be aligned exactly with what Israel wants. Kind of easy to piece that puzzle together.
Is fragile. It can be exposed. So, case in point being in the last week or so, last 2 weeks maybe, when the Chinese put forward their controls on rare earth minerals, metals, and magnets. That snapped the Americans' attention right away. That got the Americans to come to heel. That, there was some bluster, but now, of course, the United States is now negotiating it with China.
See how that always works? Trump comes out and yells the thing. Yeah, look what they're doing. Very stupid. That's not going to work. Blah, blah, blah. Truth Social, yell. And then goes off and does whatever, then capitulates. And then we don't hear any more about it. Why? Because he doesn't want to pray. He doesn't want to, report publicly the fact that he had to go to the table, right? Because so they gain the upper hand, which, by the way, anybody who's secure with themselves would not be embarrassed by acknowledging that they don't always have the upper hand, because nobody always has the upper hand. But we're dealing with narcissistic, small people that need to feel like they're in control, which to me suggests that they're not.
Trump says he's going to meet Xi. There has to be mechanisms that are developed, and we're seeing the potential for that as this multipolar world develops, as alternatives to the American financial, monetary, and economic order are developed, such as through BRICS. But in the meantime, there needs to be some type of concerted effort by nations outside of that top tier of the American sphere of influence, so essentially the Europeans, to do something to oppose any type of American regime change in Venezuela. And that has to come through in a way that is similar to what the Chinese did recently with their control of, again, rare earth minerals and metals.
Yeah, point well taken. I just highly doubt it will happen. I highly doubt any European nation will decide to stand up at this moment and push back against what Trump is doing. I find that wildly unlikely, if not impossible. And just because of the way they're conducting it, because they recognize what that will mean, Trump will penalize them in every possible way he can just for making him feel, that's what we're seeing. But I think at the end of the day, most likely because they're involved. If you really want to break down the history of this, so they all benefit from the complete dismantlement of a foreign country that they break down into its pieces and balkanize and completely sell off. That's what they've done pretty much everywhere. Now, as Dave Smith points out, it's not looking good. Here's what Sagar reported from Dropsite News. He says, as he and Dropsite reported, as a regime change ramps up in Venezuela, there is little to no mass fentanyl from Venezuela, which we already know. The Rubio camp is telling Trump the best way to secure the oil in Venezuela is if Maduro is ousted. The U.S. is funneling millions of USAID-type money, the thing that doesn't exist anymore, according to Republicans, to regime change groups in Latin America. But you see, now the USAID machine through the State Department is using different things. But maybe it might be needed to, like what might need to be used directed towards Venezuela might suddenly need to be some of these left narratives, because that was where they might lean a little bit more. So guess what? We start to see some of those things roll out through USAID that they don't want you to focus on. Like I was telling you about the circumcision in Africa and whatever else. It's a means to an end. But narratives are always fun, right? At the end of the day, they're literally showing you this is the direction. And it's not new. You go back as far as you want to look. Bolton and Trump the last time, well before that and Obama, they have been trying to achieve this. So it's like, why are we going, drugs now? It's just a new thing they yell out to go after the thing they've always been aiming at. And it's not new. I mean, imagine if Trump and his administration literally invaded into Venezuela, took out Maduro, and then claimed they took out another terrorist leader. The precedent that creates is just nobody's off the table. Every government in the world, the U.S. government or anybody else with enough power and willful, will to do so, can just invade and just call you a terrorist and take you out. Guess what? That's exactly what they're doing to you, to every American right now. Now, Trump, I'll play this clip really quickly. Roger Taylor Greene shared this. I just need to point out that even Marjorie Taylor Greene, all the statements of Israel and supporting and pushing back against them, comes right out, just like she did after the lefty thing too. Left-wing terrorists. She did the same thing. So I simply said, you see, they're all the same where it matters. Let's play it first. And then I'm going to end with the point of these two clips and about bringing it home. I just want you to miss the point that I was just making there about, that this is coming to you, and it's very clear. But let's play this clip for this one first.
If you are declaring war against these cartels and Congress is likely to approve of that process, why not just ask for a declaration of war?
Yeah, what a great question. Surprising that you get a good question, because they know they won't get it. Or really they don't care. I think the U.S. power structure is trying to force or stress the idea that Congress is irrelevant. We don't even need Constitution even. These are old ideas. We're trying to keep you all safe from the boogeyman that we create. So who cares about all the rest of it? That's what I think both sides of it want to initiate. The idea that we need to, narrative, emergency, therefore we can't do that. And if we go to Congress, we won't have enough time, whatever it is. The reality is those things shouldn't even be arguments. Shall not be infringed. Principles that should not be ignored.
Well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them. They're going to be like dead.
Who is this? I mean, this is how embarrassing. See, what he's doing right there is trying to bluster. He's trying to act like he's tough. And, I think he didn't like the question. Right? Because it sounds like the question's obvious. Why don't you do what you're supposed to do is the real question. And so he pushes back and acts like we're going to kill them all. They're going to be dead, like dead. Why would you say that? The effort is to try to stress that I'm not afraid. I'm the one. I'm strong. I'm doing the right thing, even though what you just did was ridiculous. Who cares if they're dead? That wasn't even the question. The question is, why don't you seek a declaration of war? And he knows that's uncomfortable because he's doing the wrong thing. So he just screams back, and we're going to kill everybody. It's almost like a threat. I mean, you get the sense that it's supposed to be pounding your chest. That's what he was just doing.
Okay.
So, seems to be pretty vulnerable, if you want my honest opinion, which I always give. But she says, I think we're just going to kill people, bringing drugs into our country, which, by the way, is not how the legal reality works. And she goes, I fully support Trump and our military protecting our Americans from illegally deadly drug trafficking. First of all, we should probably want to prove that, right, Green? But then we should maybe actually, I don't know, have a process to the whole thing and not just execute them in the water, even if you've proven it. But then, maybe even then we recognize that we don't have legal authority in the middle of the ocean. None of that seems to matter to these patriots. And I said, you see, they're all the same when it matters. I always hope I'm wrong about that, but history and their daily actions and their statements continue to show me otherwise. Hashtag Empire First. That's what it's really about. Scott Starr points out, war has become a sport. And the U.S. seems to have the best team. This is at least, in regard to the pieces and the money they spend. In regard to outcome, it's yet to be seen in regard to a certain few factors. But that's not the point. Article from October 24th, which shows all the team players. He goes, I find this to be sick and psychotic. You can't stop drug trafficking. There's always another way to get drugs through. I agree. It's not even about that. But just take a look at all of what they're deploying. This is the dozens of military assets that are already deployed in the Caribbean. Look at all that. To amphibious assault ships, to destroyers, to aircraft carriers, to helicopters and jets. And I mean, my God. And you're just popping off some bombs on a little boat. Clearly, it's not about the boats and the drugs, guys. So it's coming home. Now, the war on drugs, whatever you actually pretend that always was, that's always been there. This is something different. Dan Bongino on the 24th says the citizens of Philadelphia deserve safe and secure streets. The Kensington drug market has plagued the city for too long. Those days are over. Okay. You think that's what it's about? Even if it is what they're aiming at, what the precedent sets, they can do what they want, wherever they want if they yell drugs. It's no different than what they've been doing with terror and ISIS and Al-Qaeda everywhere in the world for a very long time. When President Trump told us to go get them, he wasn't kidding, and neither were we. Massive multi-location drug raid. Yeah, in people's homes. Remember what happened in Chicago with that building they claimed they were breaking down Tren de Aragua hotspot? It turned out that there was one person who was even linked to that. And I question that link. But let's just even say they were a leader of the gang. What you did to that building, flash grenade bombs in babies' rooms and all sorts of crazy things that were broadly reported, zip tying down, spending billions of dollars, whatever the hell you use to arrest one guy who was not even part of the linked to the gang, which to them means anything. It was a scare tactic. It was about, or a show for the team. Look at what we're doing, zip ties and all the big PR marketing with all the, that's what they're doing. They're trying to go, look at we are. At the end of the day, they violated tons of people's rights and they got one guy they say is linked to the thing and they go, yay, we won. Now, I'm not talking about, I'm sure there were other people they arrested for immigration. The point was what they yelled in regard to Tren de Aragua to make that all make sense. And that turned out to be a lie. Same thing with what we're talking about here, especially when we realize that it's not their constitutional reality to come in and tell you what you can and can't consume. You realize that some of these people are arresting people for cannabis right now? Cannabis. That's always been going on. The Republican side's always made an issue about that, and Trump's team has been rolling that back behind the scenes. But guys, recognize what this means. Using things that are not constitutionally valid, they are rushing into buildings, doing whatever they want, and just yelling drugs. Right now, they are literally killing people in the ocean because they say they're doing something. No different than the immigration lies they've been spinning. What happens if there's an American person on these boats? They don't even, maybe he was a stowaway. Maybe he caught the boat right before he left. See, the process is how you could avoid things like that. But on top of that, they're creating the idea that they can start bombing people anywhere, maybe on the land, as Trump just said. You may think this sounds ridiculous, but if you've been paying attention at all from the moment, probably ever, to be honest, but since Trump has taken power, you need to recognize by now that he is capable of something just like that. And that I think it frankly suits the interest of the empire, whoever is in power, for Trump to keep doing this so they can hand the baton to the left side team that continues the same agenda, because that's the way this counterbalance seems to work today. It's just sad. It's so sad that we have people that actually are tricked by this and people that seem to pretend they're helping people while they're out there enriching themselves and literally destroying everything for the status quo. So I'll leave you with another great clip. That's where I got the image from today, from Going Underground. And you've seen this before. I think I've even played this before. This is the whole economic hitman overlap. But in regard to Venezuela, rather South America, and the idea of as CIA's Operation Condor, which I argue, we ongoing discussions, ongoing agendas that are coming still from this administration. And let's not forget how much Israel is literally puppeteering the outcome, the actions of this government today. So I'll leave you with this clip as he writes, if you want to understand why the U.S. is about to launch regime change war on Venezuela, watch this. It's the same story as every other regime change war to expand the U.S. economic empire and have American corporations dominate the world. Now, I will lastly argue that what this video will show is something that I very much, to this moment, think is part of that. But I think it's bigger than that too. This is sort of the, neocon kind of war on terror. It's still very much part of what's happening. But I think we're in a different, like the rare earth minerals elements, part of it is much more prominent right now than it was before. And you've got the Israel dynamic has changed a lot of what's going on. I just want you to think about, like, this part is a very clear part of it, but really take away from it that the government will use its own personal interest or interest of its not its constituents, but its backers to drive its actions, almost always at the expense of the American people or whoever they claim they're fighting for. It's no different than what's literally happening right now. And I think is beginning to happen with Venezuela. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate all your support. As always, we put this work out for free because we believe in what we're doing, and we believe it's more important that you have access to this and all the source material for you to look at whether or not you believe you want to financially support this platform. But if you do take value from this because we do it for free, we do need your support. So show me what it's worth to you. Show me what you think the work is worth and help us continue to grow. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
To create the world's first truly global empire, and it's basically a secret empire. We do it many ways, but principally we identify a country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sisters. The money never actually goes to the country. It goes to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country that help a few very wealthy people, but don't benefit the majority of the people who are too poor to buy electricity or have cars to drive on the highways, and yet they're left holding a huge debt that they can't repay. So we go back at some point and say, you can't pay your debts. Give us a pound of flesh. Sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies. Vote with us on the next critical UN vote. Allow us to build a military base in your backyard. Something along these lines. And when we fail, the jackals go in and either overthrow or assassinate these leaders. And if the jackals fail, as they did in Iraq, then we send in the military. I don't think the failure is capitalism. I think it's a specific kind of capitalism that we've developed. We've created what I consider a mutant, viral form of capitalism. And this mutant form of capitalism, which I think is really a predatory form of capitalism, has created an extremely unstable, unsustainable, unjust, and very, very dangerous world. I've met a lot of terrorists. I've interviewed them for books. I've never met one who wanted to be a terrorist. They're desperate people. If we want to get rid of terrorism, we must get rid of the root causes, that cancer that is destroying our whole system. Because I think it's really important that we understand today we cannot have homeland security unless we understand that the whole planet is our homeland.